You need to turn on video ability or whatever. There we go. There we go.
Jennifer,
Yes,
you can see me and hear me, right?
I can. And I just promoted Yoi to panelist.
Well, how about that?
Aren't I fancy?
All right.
Actually, I probably didn't tell you this, but all the directors at some point will probably be speaking.
Yeah, they're all directors. I mean, they're all panelists.
Okay.
And then I think we have 2 members of the public attending.
Okay.
Yep. Right now, at least. And I know a handful of you are muted, but I'm assuming that's because you wish to be at this moment.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Hi, everybody.
Good evening.
Bad.
Here's Bud. I'll let you stay today.
Thank you. You kicked me out of my own house.
I keep telling Katie the worst already happened.
Yeah.
I can't mess it up that much more.
Hi, Pam.
Hey, Bud. Hey, Todd. Ooh, Webster Groves. Is that?
That's the one in the chambers,
Oh,
the hub.
got it. Scott? Tom?
Hey, all.
Greetings, everyone.
There's David. Okay. There's Scott. Okay.
I realize I'm not quite as centered as some of the individuals. Like, okay, maybe I'll move over here.
I think we're missing the mayor and Steve and Emerson. Are any of you here and I just can't find you? There's Steve. Nope. There she is. There we go. Okay. So I just put Jerry in there. So I think we're just missing Emerson. I will call him and see. I guess it's only 6:01. Should I call him? Do you guys think?
First rule of Zoom meetings is that you're never late.
That's good to know. All right, I'll call him. He did not answer. And he's not in the attendees room, so
You call
So-
it cell phone or his home?
I did.
You didn't call it home phone?
I will try the home phone.
I can do it.
He did not answer there either. So I don't know.
Mayor, did you see this? Let's see. Missouri's number 2, year over year, and decline in state tax revenue just in April.
Wow.
Yeah.
David, what is that article? I couldn't tell.
It's from Axios. It's called, I'll send it out, States face economic death spiral from coronavirus. Missouri has a 53.4% decrease in year over year change in state tax revenue just for April.
I think this may be from Emerson on my phone. The link to get on the budget workshop webinar is not working. It says it is blocked. Just wondering if anyone else is having this issue, if there's another way I can get on. Okay, I was
You
able
can
to
go-
get on, but not via the link. I had to
All
go
right,
to,
let's see. See
I
in
just-
the, he might be in the attendees area. Hang on, I'm looking.
he had to go to Zoom, then put in the meeting ID and password. Glad that worked. Is that somebody else?
Is he 9520910?
No, this is from 3976091. Who's that?
He's not in the waiting area, then, if that's not him on the phone.
This is somebody else at 5:45. Oh, it's Jamie from the Webster Kirkwood.
That
Times.
No, she's on there.
Yeah, I know. She got on.
There's somebody else who's, oh, that was Jamie who was having trouble, not Emerson. Well,
Yeah.
Katie's going to keep trying to call Emerson and see what she can do. So she said, you guys, if you wanted to get started, you could, because she's looking for him.
I think that's probably a good idea. We don't know where he is, do we?
I
We don't-
don't.
Does anybody know where he is?
So,
No.
hope he's all right.
Spoke to him today.
Pardon me?
Joanne spoke to him today, so he's around.
Oh, here he comes. Here he comes.
Oh, there he is.
He's not moving.
All right, guys, I'm sorry I'm late.
Well, we were all worried
Glad
about
you're
you.
here.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, I had a little urgent emergency I had to take care of.
Okay, let's call this budget session to order. And we're going to just turn this right over to Mr. Wiley and Ms. Jadali. Which one of you is going to start?
If I wave at her, can she see?
I would be happy to.
There you go.
So I'm going to switch over to my, share my screen first.
Okay,
And it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, well, I should be able to do that, shouldn't I?
So while we're working this out, can I make one suggestion about the introductory material?
Yes.
We have our mission statement as a city as part of this. I'd like for us to include, if possible, our diversity and inclusion statement, because clearly how we spend our money should reflect those values as well. And so it would be a good place to remind us of that.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Joanne, that should be on for you.
And yes, I can do that. If the council agrees and they want it in the budget, I'm more than happy to put it there. There was a lot to do to put it together, but it's still.
okay.
Is it working? Yes.
Yep.
All right.
But it's not. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
Full screen?
Yes. Yeah, I can
Okay.
see it.
So first of all, I wanted to welcome everyone to the budget workshop. And what I'd like to do is go through and explain to you the way in which I want to go through things this evening. First, I'm going to go through just a quick outline of the actual document, because there were a couple of changes that were made this year as opposed to prior years. And the reason for that is, if you recall, we had a small amount in last year's budget, or the 2020 budget, for software changes, and most of them have been great, but there are a few little uh-ohs that you might find in the budget document. I hope you don't, but you probably will. And I'll just tell you about one right now, and that is that I had moved a $250,000 item to fiscal year 22. Unfortunately, I only did it in one spot, and I forgot to take it out of the general fund revenue. So the numbers that you have in your budget are $250,000 lower than the revenue or the reserve number that I will be presenting to you. So at least I have one good thing to share about this presentation. I think I have others, but that's one thing I wanted to point out to you right from the very beginning. So I want to go over, like I said, the budget document, and I'll do that in a minute, but I also then will go through the PowerPoint presentation. I have several slides. And then at the very close to the end of it, we're going to talk about the capital items. And this year we're not going to do, as Steve mentioned in his email earlier, we won't be discussing all of the capital items, but we will be doing several that are coming up in 2021. And then we'll also be discussing some big ones that are in future years that I'm going to have the department directors speak on as well. So if you'll first just take a peek at your budget document if you have it, I wanted to just point out a couple of things. And that is that if you look in about, or on about page 42, that shows the general fund revenues. And this year, with this particular accounting software, it puts the transfers in the revenue section. So if it's an issue that, you know, we can talk about it and we can move it, it just becomes one of those challenges to make sure we always move it and we always keep track of it, because every other place and every other fund, it's in the revenue section. It's under other sources. It's the last item in the revenue section on page 42. However, the confusion is that even though it's there and it shows as a revenue, on my pages that I created myself, so the 3-year summaries, which are on page 38 and 39, they show them separate from the revenues. And the reason I continued to do that, even though I knew that the transfers were part of revenues on the other parts, was because I wanted to show at the very close to the bottom where it shows the other financing sources and uses, where it shows those transfers and in and out. I wanted to show you that, yes, they do net to zero, which they should. You should not have more transfers in or more transfers out, or you have a problem. So that's why it's set up that way. It's also set up on the next page where it's got the individual funds. Again, just those 4 pages are not from the accounting software or through the new report, new budget software that we use. Those 4 pages are still from an Excel spreadsheet that I do. One other item that's different is that the sewer lateral is in a different spot as well, the sewer lateral revenue. So on page 66, it shows the sewer lateral items. It's under property tax, which is the way it is collected. It's collected just like the other property taxes are collected. So that's why it was categorized that in the accounting system when we started with it in 2006. That's when we got New World. And so that's where it is in that system. Again, if we'd like to have it in other revenue, I believe is where it was in the other budget in the access database, we can move that. I'm not sure if it's that significant of an issue or not, but on that summary sheet, I do have it separated out as sewer lateral fees like I have done in prior years. Anyway, if you have any questions about the budget document, let me know, but we're going to move forward then to the presentation. So first off, this is the all funds revenue. And I wanted to point out a few things to you on it. If you look at the property tax, that's pretty much the same. I don't anticipate very many changes. Even in 2008, 2009, when we had the recession, I don't recall us having significant problems with the property tax. We were able to collect pretty much the same amount. It was lower by a few percentages, but it was pretty normal. So I haven't really adjusted the property tax at all in any of the funds. The next one is intergovernmental revenue, and you'll see that there's a tremendous jump up for 2021. And that might surprise you, but if you recall, intergovernmental revenue not only includes the statewide sales taxes, which I have reduced for 2020 and 2021, but it also includes grants. And we're going to be receiving, we believe, almost $1.4 million in grant revenue in 2021.
From where?
I'm sorry?
From where?
From where? Okay, 675,000 is Park and Rec, and 683,000 is Public Works. And I can ask the specific projects.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
The next one is sales tax. For every area on the sales tax for the 2020 estimated, I reduced it by 20%. And for 2021, I reduced it by 5%. And I want to explain that for a minute.
Yeah.
So the reason I did the percentages this way is that I assumed that in 2020, we would have at least 2 months of close to no revenue. And then in 2021, we would get back still below what we were expecting for 2020, but we would be in a better situation. And the reason I say this is because of the way we book revenue in our comprehensive annual financial report. So even though we say our fiscal year end is June 30, sales tax revenues are actually July and August are booked to June 30. So the revenue that you would see starting in September is what first, so it was what we collect in September from St. Louis County and from the state. And so then it's collected from individuals 2 months prior. So it would be the July revenue collected from residents that then we receive in September. That's what we start booking for our budget for 2021. And so that's why I reduced it by that amount as opposed to a much higher amount. For utility taxes. I'm sorry?
Is that a bit optimistic though, considering the state of the economy and the unknowns?
Well,
Do you really
so
think we could budget that high for sales tax?
So it depends. So some individuals were booking theirs extremely low compared, or they were saying they were reducing their total budget by 40%. But they're in very small municipalities where they don't have anything at all. Here in Webster Groves, which is interesting, is close to the end of the fiscal year, I will always see, at least the businesses within Webster, the sales taxes are generated higher, and we usually always get more in revenues from the local businesses around May, June, July, and August than we do other times of the year. I don't know why that is, but those are local taxes.
That's not likely to happen this year though, is it? They're all closed.
I'm not certain, because I can tell you, I've talked to several people who say they can't wait to get out and go shopping because some people are online shoppers. Many people are online shoppers. And I think that's something that we need to address. And it's something that Jerry has spoken about a lot. And I know that the city manager wrote it in his budget message that we need to address the online sales issue. But I will also say though, there are some of us who don't shop online like me, and I can't wait till the malls are open again so I can actually go out and pick out my own clothes instead of ending up with something that doesn't fit.
So I just want to echo Bud a little bit. And Joanne, you and I talked about it yesterday, and I appreciate that greatly. But the optimism in this sort of assumes that there's no second or third wave of the virus that impacts people's willingness to go out. It also assumes that people will go back to normal activity, and all the survey data says people are really cautious about thinking about how they're going to re-enter the economy. And so it makes me really nervous for us to project that much and end up in a position where we're not going to hit the mark, especially as we contemplate how we're spending that money.
Understand too that restaurants, which we heavily depend on, we have some great ones here, some of them might not come back. And even so, those that do, the margins in the restaurant business are very small. And they're not going to survive on 25% customers. They got to get back, and they got to get back quickly. I've heard estimates of maybe 20 to 25 small businesses nationally will not return.
I'm going to add to your pessimism, having just watched the NBC News at 5:30, and everybody's anticipating a second wave. Some university systems are now they've canceled their fall classes and gone to online. So I share Bud and Laura's sense of pessimism here.
Well, I understand. I can say that with sales tax, as you know, probably more than anybody, Jerry, that as an economics professor or former economics professor, you know that sales tax is the most elastic of all. So of course, in times like this, sales tax is going to fluctuate tremendously compared to the others. That's why I haven't gotten to this point yet. But even if I am too optimistic with these numbers, and I'm more than willing to adjust, these are just guesses. I don't have a crystal ball. And I appreciate everybody's thoughts and comments on it, but I'm just doing the best I can,
Yeah, we
So-
understand that, but I think we're all a little bit nervous about the $8 million number.
Right, I understand. So we can make adjustments for that, but there are other numbers on here that I think are much more static, like I mentioned, the property taxes. And the utility taxes, that again was looking and thinking, well, the businesses are closed though, but they still have certain utilities that they have to operate in order to keep the building functional and things like that. So I don't even know. But what I know on the utility tax is that I've read several reports that it's going to be a hot summer, hotter than it has been in the past couple of years. So that's why I didn't adjust my Ameren bill down, or my estimates down further from where I have them.
That's fair to say, but it's also dependent on people having the money to pay their utility taxes.
But
I'd be more optimistic about utility tax number being pretty solid, but I'm still worried about that sales tax.
Yeah.
Joanne, can you, this is more for reference of everyone who's listening also, but the sales tax includes not only direct sales here in Webster Groves, but also the pool tax throughout.
Yes, and actually, David, I'm going to go to that slide in just a little bit. I have all the different sales taxes. Is that okay?
And the reason, yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say, the reason I bring that up is because I mean, this is just me hypothesizing and conjecture, but I feel like in a heavily white collar community like Webster Groves, where a lot of individuals are still able to work from home and support their local businesses, our local businesses here in Webster Groves might have the opportunity to a greater extent to rebound than, say, a business in a more blue collar or a neighborhood that doesn't have the opportunity to have white collar workers or doesn't have that. And so while our businesses might succeed, I think that the question that I have is more, what does St. Louis County look like as a whole, considering that a great portion of our sales tax come from the pool tax?
Right.
Good
Well,
point.
and so I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said good point, David.
Okay. I was just going to say that that is a very good point, because we get a lot of sales tax from Chesterfield. And some municipalities like Chesterfield and others have suffered much more than we have, and what I think we will, because they rely on sales tax and they do not have a property tax. And so, you know, we have so many various sources of revenue, so we're not going to be harmed as tremendously as somebody who, I'm going to take the phrase from what investors say, but don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And we have not. And so even though that's the largest source of revenue for us, we have others. For example, charges for services, which is for ambulance services, and the inspection fees and permits, which is, you know, crazy high right now, and other items that we haven't been impacted like other entities have been.
Joanne, you said you're going to break down that sales tax.
Yes, in a few
numbers.
minutes. I have a slide.
All right, great.
So I'll just skip to the expenses then, and you can see.
Oh, can we go back and you can finish that slide? Because there are other things in there that we perhaps might have a question about, like recreation fees. How, if the complex is closed for a while, how do we get those recreation fees?
Okay, I can have Scott talk about that now. I was going to wait till we get to the general fund, but
Okay,
Scott, if
that's
you'd like
fine.
to.
That's fine if you're.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Scott, if you will, please.
Hi, so we originally with this budget had proposed, we had it submitted on an 8-week shutdown, which is end of last week. So those numbers for in current year's revenue sources and such will need to be bumped a little bit since we haven't reopened. We were anticipating on that $2,200,000 that we would be open July 1st. And depending on what county determines and how they want to go with that will obviously impact those sources somewhat. A lot of those are offsetting expenses for us a lot of times. For instance, you know, the pool, the expenses and the revenue are pretty close to being the same. So if something like that got completely wiped out, there's not a huge impact. If it's completely wiped out, if you go half and half, then obviously the impact could be greater depending on how many people choose to purchase memberships or use daily admission, or how many people county allows us to have in the facility at any given time.
Joanne, can I ask, I'm sorry, I know that I'm going to switch topics, Scott, I appreciate that, and I really like your background, by the way, but what I was going to ask is, you know, the only thing that we really have to go off of in historical past right now is the 2008 financial crisis, which is shocking to say that we've had 2 financial crises in my lifetime, much less anyone else's lifetime. But more importantly, what did our tax revenue look like in the decrease during those most difficult years of the financial crisis? And what was the change over year that we could at least possibly base what could be coming or what might be down the pipeline in this financial crisis?
I'm trying to remember, well, I don't remember 2008 so well. I had just started here at Webster Groves in 2007. So
Probably
I will have to
2009,
look that up.
2010 would be the worst.
I'm sorry?
Probably 2009 and 2010 would be the worst in that period.
I can
David,
actually follow up with you.
could you ask that question again, a short version of that?
Yeah, all I'm trying to do is like look at it from a historical perspective and say, hey, do we have anything to base what we could budget here? And I think if we can go back to the 2008 financial crisis, the worst years of that crisis, and look at our tax revenue and how it decreased year over year, and maybe start from there as a basis and figure out, do we want to decrease more and say, hey, that's too big of a decrease in budgeting. That's all. It's the only thing that I feel like I have to base anything of what's coming down the pipeline.
I think if you go back to that, you'll see that it wasn't a big crisis here, like Joanne said, because we're spread out quite a bit. And what you'll see during that, I'm just going from memory mostly, is flat, flat-ish revenues. We submitted 3 deficit budgets in a row. I think fiscal 9, 10, and 11, the first one, from memory a little bit, was 300 grand upside down. And we promised council we'd spend less than we have budgeted. We'll watch it as the year goes on. The next year we were 200 and some under, as I recall, and the third year we were just 100 and some. So it was gradually picking up a little bit over that course. In none of those 3 years did we ever go upside down. So we always balanced. One of them might have been like $1,200 or something, if I remember. But we came out of that okay. So for your perspective, this is a much more acute attack on finances.
Yes.
But we see it as a bite out of a period in time. And you know, that's the second and third wave stuff. That gloom and doom, again, 11 million bucks in the bank.
You know, and I'm sure we're going to get to this later, Steve, but during those years, did we provide salary increases to Webster employees?
I think 1 year we didn't. 1 year we didn't for one. It was either the across the board or the mid-year little bump. I remember 1 0 year, they were probably 1%. I remember 1% instead of 2%. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if all those years were the 1% across the board instead of 1.5% or 2%. The first year, especially, as I recall, we left some positions empty for a while. And, you know, it's just all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. We made adjustments. We probably let some vacancies linger for a while purposefully, the art part of putting it together to make it all come to the right spot at the end of the fiscal year. And so we doctored it along the way, which of course is something you can do next year with this budget as well, if you ever get to finding it palpable. You know, a couple little things I would just note. This budget also doesn't include any potential revenue from this county distribution that may be coming. It doesn't include any revenue from all the FEMA numbers, which is intended to replace labor costs indiscriminately to some degree. It's just keep track of all of it. You can't separate a COVID-related call to what you did with any call you went to. So it doesn't presume anything from those sources. Certainly doesn't presume anything from the Wayfair decision that the legislature gets off its butt and does, and anything like that. So those are just, I have no idea what those numbers would be either, you know, but I'm just mentioning that
So,
there's. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, in regards to the intergovernmental revenue, the $1.4 million in projected grants, is there any chance due to COVID that those grant numbers are either delayed or not extended this year because the grantor doesn't have the funds?
I don't think so.
No.
Looking for Scott,
No.
looking for Todd.
Yeah, no, the federal government money, the grants that we have through the federal government for Marshall Road and for Big Bend downtown.
Say that one more time, Todd.
It's federal grants, one for Marshall Road and the other one's for the Big Bend sidewalk project.
Right. Federal money
Federal
there.
funds, no.
It's doubtful it would be pulled. Scott?
Mine are from the Municipal Park Grant Commission, and it's for the tennis courts, which is ongoing now. It's fully funded. We just won't realize that revenue until the project is finished in July, and then we'll submit it in August and be paid probably in September. And the other one was for also with Municipal Park Grant Fund for Blackburn Park. So they're fully funded. They don't give out any of that money unless they've already got the money sitting in the bank.
It's good to know. Thank you.
All right, Joanne, let's go back to our presentation.
Okay. So I'm finished with this page.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go to the expenditures now. And I just wanted to point out that for this, typically it doesn't look like this, where your 2020 amended and 2021 proposed is close to $31 million. The reason for that is because we had Firehouse 2 expenditures in both budgets. Typically, what would happen is in 2020, when we sold the bonds, we would also do purchase orders for the items for the maximum amounts. We did not do that this time because we didn't want to have large purchase orders out there until we knew the exact amounts or close to the bids for construction, etc. So we rebudgeted it in 2021 from what was in 2020. So we didn't spend much in 2020. And I have a separate Firehouse or Fire Station 2 sheet that I'll show you in a little bit. But just so you know, expenditures are usually not this high, but the reason 2021 is as high as it is because of Firehouse 2.
Joanne,
Yes.
that typo up there, personal instead of personnel services.
Yes.
I see that's throughout the book. I guess that's in the template. So
It's in the accounting software. So if we can, we'll try to change it, but it was put in 2006 and that's the way it was spelled, unfortunately.
well, it's been saying personnel in previous budgets I looked at.
But the previous budget was done by our IT manager, and
Software.
it was in a different software.
Looks funny.
Joanne's gotten used to it. The rest of us are going to have to learn too.
It's just, there's only so many things I can change at a time. So this is just a summation then of the revenues minus the expenditures. And so at the very bottom, and I apologize if it's hard to read, but the net difference between revenues and expenditures for all funds is the $5,756,660. And of course, most of that is Firehouse 2. And then of course, there's a portion which is the general fund as well.
Joanne, can any of those expenses be documented as a payable or receivable in the current year?
So whatever we have booked properly as accounts payable and receivable. I already talked to my finance manager earlier today. And so, for example, on the tennis court project, those items that we will receive in future years are booked as receivables, future receivables. But anything that we can, we do book properly because we're audited by the auditors every year to make sure that we're in compliance.
Okay. Oh, no, it's just a question. Since the expense happened in another year, should it be realized in a year that was actually happened?
But we do. So I'm like, for example, for purchase orders, we designate that in the fiscal year in which the purchase order is taken out, and we do encumbrances and everything like that. But that's for another discussion because that's in the comprehensive annual financial report. We don't show encumbrances here in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
So here are the primary revenue sources, all funds, and generally most of these are relatively the same as you've seen in prior years. However, the sales tax number is lower and intergovernmental is higher. The recreation is about the same or I think it's slightly lower because I think it was 11% last year, and so on. And I was going to mention about the more stable revenue sources, but I already discussed that part. So I'll skip this section. This one is the expenditures for all funds. Personnel is usually slightly higher and capital is usually a bit lower, but the capital is higher because of Firehouse 2. And then the other, which is the 5%, those are the principal and interest payments for the general obligation bonds. So this is the slide I was mentioning earlier with regard to sales tax, and these are the taxes that we receive right now. And I just wanted to designate what percentage of tax is charged, and then whether it's a pool tax or a point of sale tax. The next one is the residential real estate tax rates, and I always like to point this out and show the difference from the 2019 calendar year and the 2010 calendar year, which was 10 years ago. And you can see that the top one, the debt retirement, is lower. And we established that several years ago, and we're trying to maintain that same levy. And when I get to for the discussion a little later about the aquatic center, I'll talk about debt and what my goal would be about this to continue the same rate if possible. And then the police and fire pension fund, that has increased. If you recall, voters approved it up to 0.2%. And it was approved at almost, I think, 80% or something like that. And it is a much better benefit now for police and fire. And I understand that sometimes when it is in advertisements, when the position is advertised for filling police and fire positions, and that is something that applicants look at and are interested in.
Will we see year end over year end almost, I mean, that's an 8% increase. Will we see that in the police and fire pension going forward?
So no, not really. So every year an actuary calculates the rates, and actually it was in the budget message, and they're not allowed, loggers is not allowed to increase the rate more than 1% per year, but usually it's much, much less than that. I don't know what this next year is going to be like, but because I'm a board member, I get their investment information on a weekly basis. And shockingly, they're doing well, not tremendously well, but they're still doing relatively well considering the situation with the stock market. And then this is just another one that I like to share because I like to point out that while we do charge a property tax, 9% of the total tax bill is what we collect. And other entities, of course, need to charge higher rates because they don't have the sources of revenue like we do. But it's important, I think, for people to understand that we don't take a lot, we don't charge a lot in tax rates for the services that we provide. And for those 4 items I just showed, the total tax amount for a home that's appraised at $299,000 or assessed at $56,810 is $407.33 of a total tax bill of $4,455. I think that's really important for people to understand. And then this is just another slide that shows the property tax comparisons over the years. I just wanted to show this slide very quickly. The blue is the street improvement bonds, and the greenish is the fire station bonds. I probably should have done a different slide to show the combination up here instead of the way it is here. So I'm going to show you the next one, which is easier to see and understand. So for 2021, our total bond debt is $1.7 million. But by 2025, it's $546,000. And I think that when Scott says that he would like, if possible, for us to look at a bond issue in 2024 for the aquatic center, that is the perfect time for it, because then we could continue our rate or perhaps even lower it, because these were, this was $13 million in bonds that was spread out for 15 years, these street improvement ones. And I believe Scott's is much less, it's like $5 million. So we could do like we did for Fire Station 2, where it's $500,000 and it's 10 years and the rates are really low. And I'm going to apologize for this one because I didn't realize I had it so shaped so funky on the screen. But this is the new Fire Station 2 slide, and I just wanted to show you basically that if you look at this right-hand column, that's where the $4.5 million in expenses are. If you look at the prior years, please don't, because that's just confusing since we didn't spend the money in the prior years in that, like is originally in the amended budget. The next one I wanted to point out to you is the public safety sales tax. And when I get further along, I'll show you the amounts in the total, what comprises each of the transfers so that you can see that. And I know Bud and I had a conversation about the transfers. And I know last year there was an interest by others of seeing it. So I do have it in the PowerPoint. It's just not right here right now. But under the public safety sales tax, I have budgeted to transfer a lot of it, almost $1.7 million to the general fund for police and fire salaries. And these are what has accumulated over the past 3 years. It is not transfers for any other items, but just those two departments.
Joanne, is this in our budget that we have?
Yes. You mean is the public safety sales tax?
No, this particular slide that you're showing us.
Is it in your budget document?
No.
So you should have public safety sales tax. Let me get to it and I'll tell you what page.
This actually, that's okay. You can tell me what page later, because this is much more simply defined in my brain. And so it's really helpful to me.
Okay.
And just so I'm clear on this, Joanne, is the projected revenues less this year than the previous year because of COVID?
Yes, by 20%.
All right. Awesome.
Yes, because I thought I must reduce it in order to give a reasonable projection.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Joanne, if it becomes greater than a 20% amount, we could end up with no fund balance for next year's salaries, right?
If it is more than that, then for next year's, correct. That is correct.
Okay. Because once we give those salary increases, they will become part of next year's budget too, correct?
Yes. Now, I will tell you though, that one of the things that is confusing with the public safety sales tax was that a few months ago, we received money from the state of Missouri and they made a miscalculation by, it was over $100,000. And so then the next month they adjusted it. So I don't know where we're supposed to be. And unfortunately, because we can't do audits and all of this, I have to rely just on what I am doing in my projections and things like that. So generally I'm conservative. And in this case, I am conservative on that, on my estimated fund balance number for 2020. So it could be higher. I haven't adjusted because, so for example, we just got some sales tax revenue in just a few days ago, and I did not adjust anything because it would then not match with the proposed budget that we gave you.
You gotta love the great state of Missouri.
Well, you know, one of the issues was, I'm trying to remember now if it was last year or the year before last, they converted to a new software. And I was noticing that there was a problem with the amount of sales tax revenue that we were getting. And I kept asking and calling them and saying, are you behind? No, we're fine. They were behind at least 2 months. So even the numbers that I had in the CAF for that year were wrong because they were behind in the collection of revenue and posting of revenue that they collected from the businesses. So the general fund, this is again in the intro section of the budget, and this is pretty much the same. But just so you know, when I do the pie charts and the other things in this presentation, I took out the transfers because I didn't want them to confuse things and I wanted this to compare to prior years. This is my general fund revenue comparison. So the property tax, I didn't adjust much at all. Intergovernmental revenue, I decreased for 2020 the gas tax. I decreased the state auto sales tax for 2020. And then for 2021, I increased the county road and bridge tax because the numbers have just increased for the last few years, especially with 2020. So I just increased it based on that. It wasn't like I was trying to be generous with that number. And then on the sales tax, again, I did the same thing with the general fund that I did with all the other funds on the sales taxes. And I already mentioned the utility taxes. On the licenses, this includes business license fees and other items there. On the business licenses, for the current year, I didn't adjust it much at all for my estimate, but for next year I did because it's based on prior year gross receipts. For fines, we have an issue with that because of a number of factors, but of course, one of them being the courts were closed and we're just not able to collect the revenues. So for 2020, I'm estimating that we'll be down from the budget by about 15.5%. And then the next year, I believe it'll be about 6% because I think we'll be able to we have our first court June 23rd, I think it is.
And is that going to be done via Zoom or remotely, or is that going to be in person?
No, it's going to be in person, but they're going to set it up so there's social distancing. It's going to be quite a situation because we're going to have additional days, I believe, for court so that we can still see the number of people we need to see, but that we follow the guidelines that we need to follow. So actually, there's going to be a meeting tomorrow with my finance manager and other individuals to discuss what needs to happen and how we need to do markings and such so that we can properly keep people spaced apart, et cetera. And whether or not we're going to provide masks, because I think the goal is to have everybody wear a mask.
So in regards to fines, Joanne, does that include not only tickets issued by police officers, but also fines issued by like our buildings department or anything
Those
like
are
that?
separate court dates.
Those are courts.
Yes.
Oh,
It all goes through the court, David.
but it's all included in the fines budget analysis, right?
Yes.
Oh, so I mean, during this so far, are we issuing similar number of tickets, and
No.
also are we issuing the same number of building inspection violations or home inspection and violations?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I know we're issuing less tickets, but I'll let Steve talk about that.
Mara, are you there? Next week, we go back to the regular shifts. We've been slightly under that time-wise, employee by employee in police. Next week, we go back to the regular shift. So it'll be as many hours on the street. Apprehension about face-to-face contact will remain, but we have had everybody devoted to general patrol and so forth, including traffic unit detectives and so forth. So that's a long-winded introduction to your question. It'll start ticking back up at this point until we all feel safer. I don't expect, and nor would we lean on the police officers to be overzealous. We don't anyway. I mean, they write violations when they see them, but so it'll start ticking up as will court revenue. We've been issuing citations. We send pleading letters to people, urging them to fix whatever, is being complained about and that kind of stuff. We've seen some property maintenance issues increasing, so we're back at that again. How that materializes eventually in actual court revenues, another story. Again, a little bit down the line, a little bit with some of these things. You believe in America, we're going to come back, and as usual here, I never thought I'd be the optimistic one in the room, but
no. The reason I asked is just, it's only a $40,000 difference in budget from 2020 to 2021, and I just wonder if that's a little over optimistic as well. And I know
We haven't been doing any for the last couple months.
Yeah. And,
No
and
court.
Yeah.
No court,
And
no
just from a
traffic.
safety issue, right? Like, I mean,
Yep.
for our own employees. So, and I just wonder, like, in the event a second or third wave comes, like Laura suggested or indicated, that whether that continues and that and granted, and I know that this is a difference of maybe not nearly as much as, say, the sales tax. I'm just wondering, are we just being a little bit too optimistic to some degree? That's all.
So David, we have not issued any tickets in this entire time for housing violations, but we have continued to do the letters. But I will tell you that our numbers of housing violation issues aren't usually a huge number in that overall.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know I owe a parking ticket, so that will be $20 coming to the city of Webster Groves.
Okay, so we already discussed some of the other items such as the rec fees. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention was the other income, and that's the 2020 estimate is very high. There is a number of reasons for that, including the fact that we have received $50,000 from Chapman Ventures for the Pacific project, so that we have that money to use for PR and other items, our Gilmore Bell attorney, etc. So that's very helpful. We also have other things in this category. For example, our GIS employee, we charge the city of Maplewood for some of the services she provides them. So it's in there. And then payments for the tennis court project, the annual payment we put in there from the one-time payment from Webster Groves School District. They just paid it all together, and then Nerex Hall and Webster University. And if you recall, that was basically we fronted the money for the project cost, and then they're paying us back annually, with the exception of Webster Groves School District, which paid it all in one fell swoop.
Thank you.
I'm just going to skip this because I already talked about it. And then these are just the primary uses of revenue. You can see police is at 30%. It's generally the same percentages. Public Works is down slightly, and I believe Park and Rec is up slightly from the prior year. And I apologize, this one looks funky, but I was having trouble with my PowerPoint, and so I just copied that from something else.
Hey, you got it right there, personnel services. Yay. That's remarkable. 76% of our general fund goes to personnel.
Yes, we're very conservative as far as our needs and our wants. And we don't have a lot of materials and supplies, or the contractual is becoming more and more about online things and items for leases for computer equipment and software and such.
I think there are other cities that put a lot of their capital into their general fund, and that makes that pie look a little different.
Yes, I think you're correct.
You are correct. There are cities that pile all their revenue in just one big spot and then make it fit the narrative.
So then this is just something I showed you last year, and I wanted to show it to you again so that you could see the expenses for the 5 years for each of the departments. As you can see, planning and development's very flat. Public Works is flat. For Parks and Rec and general government, we're kind of doing a dance here, it looks like. And then police and fire are up a lot higher. Of course, they have more personnel, so of course they're going to be at higher amounts because of the personnel costs, the salaries and such. And so here is the departmental expenditures. And again, it is less than what you had on yours by $250,000. And you can see the increases, the higher ones are police, because we are now trying to make that salary adjustment to try to make them equitable with a number of other communities because they have fallen behind. Interestingly, when Prop P was passed, we didn't do too much with the Prop P revenue, especially with salaries, because we didn't have a lot and we wanted to study and determine what we should do. Unfortunately, some cities actually have used their Prop P money and they've gotten ahead of us. And so we're not where we need to be with police right now.
And that's about a little over a 10% increase over 2020, isn't it, overall?
Yes, if you, with salaries and benefits, because you have the overtime and again, I mean, there are certain things. We did not remove overtime, for example, for community days, but that would be something that we could reduce. And
my thought is,
I'm sorry.
Our revenue isn't increasing by 10%.
That is always a situation with Webster Groves because we're a predominantly residential community. So we're always, every year that I've been here, it's always been a matter of cutting the budget in order to make it so we can provide you with a budget that is balanced. And it's hard. Every year I have to cut something.
This is, if you look at the bottom line, there's an increase in total expenditures of about $1.5 million, correct?
Well, but you can't compare 20 estimated to 21 budget, or because budget year is always the estimate is always going to be lower than the budget because we always have turnover and other items like that. But if you look, so let me just slide here. If you look at this, compare this to this, it's a 1.8% reduction. And then if you compare this, whoa,
it's
this
a
to this, it's 6.7% of an increase.
1.2 million, right?
Yes.
Well, if you break that down, I looked at that on page 5 of the budget, and it's government, general government is going up by 9%, police a little over 11%, fire only 5%, public works only 2.5%. A big one for parks and recreation, 23.5%. And I assume that's probably something with the to do with the tennis courts. Is that right?
Not for the general fund. That would have to do with probably, and I'll let Scott speak, but I think part of it has to do with the increase in salaries for seasonal and part-time employees.
Well, that's a big chunk of money out of that.
That's not at all. That's just a portion.
Part of that was the 200-something thousand that we didn't get moved over, Joanne, from out of the 16 park budget for the new park. So if you pull that 200-something thousand out, that percentage will drop down quite a bit, bud.
The new park?
Yes. So we in the budget book, it's listed under Fund 16 or Account 16 Parks, and it needed to get moved out into the capital improvement. Originally, I had it put in the park side.
How much is that, Scott? How much would that take out?
I thought I adjusted this one, but maybe I didn't.
Yeah, wasn't that the one you were talking about, Joanne? 200,000.
Yeah, $250,000.
Okay.
Are you asking what page it is or what? Because that's something we're going to discuss later.
Yeah.
I think it's page 208.
343 is the new park.
Yeah.
Jerry, you got a what new park look on your face there. They're going to talk about that a little more in detail, and it's not a park in any stereotypical sense of the word, but it is something that's still in development and isn't finalized at all, that involves other organizations. So you can, I think you probably got that under future capital stuff, Joanne, is that right?
I do. You know what? I can wrap this up soon. and then we can.
I'm not rushing.
Okay. So this is the 15-year history
Back
for
up just a
revenues and
second,
expenditures.
Joanne. The last one on that list, planning and development went up. You know, it's a smaller piece of the pie, obviously in total, but it increased by 8.3%. So the overall increase of 10% really lies in about 3 areas there for the most part.
Planning and development is a very small department, so they would not have much impact at all on the total general fund budget.
No, not in total, but they're just relative to their own previous year, their increase of about 8.3%.
I'll have to look at that because there shouldn't have been that much of an adjustment for theirs.
Yeah, that's not right.
It's on page 5.
Unless one of the cuts wasn't properly made.
It shows the estimate for 20 is 730,000, and the budget for 21 is 792,000, roughly.
Okay, well, I'll look at that up later.
We had another body in there for a while. Did that get taken out?
I will double check because that's in the revenue narrative and I mean your budget narrative, and I may have miskeyed it. I will look at the actual departmental stuff. I'll just look really quick. Well, I just looked and it is that amount, so I don't know. If Mara is available, perhaps she can remind us if there's some separate item in here. Because I thought her budget was really.
I'm not sure why it's so different because we removed the 2 staff we were adding.
Yes.
We removed just about everything else. It should be virtually flat with the exception of, you know, the minor pay increase.
I will check because sometimes, I mean, we tried really hard with the accounting software, but as you know, you just make one key. You touch one key wrong and you're all really messed up. So I will make a note and I'll check on that.
In absolute dollars, it's only about 60,000. Just percentage increase is what sounds big.
Yeah, that's too much.
Yeah, that number's not, that can't be right.
No, because hers was really flat. Okay, so this is this next slide I wanted to show you. It shows the general fund estimated fund balance at the end of year for fiscal year 21 based on my projections. And I show that the beginning fund balance as of July 1, 2020 would be 10,852,000. And then plus the revenues minus the expenditures and the transfers, the ending fund balance is 9,975,000.
Just to make a point there, I was going to make it when I go over my graph, but while you got that up there, that 9.9 million, well, rounded to 10 million, is getting pretty close to our 50% threshold when we look at an $18 billion general fund.
That is true. And but our fund balance policy, we've always for many years been ahead of what the fund balance policy even says. And as we discussed this I don't remember how many months ago it's been, I think it was either December or January when we went over our CAFR, we had a discussion about the fund balance policy, and many cities and the actual GFOA's policy, I pulled it up, and it says generally, and of course we can do whatever we want, but their general recommendation is 2 months of expenditures. And of course we have much more than that. And even in this situation, if we use the estimates, and of course that's all I can propose at this moment, but we'd be at 53%. But
So
again, usually on the expenditure side, we do not spend all the money that we're budgeted. We usually save at least 2%, sometimes as much as 4%.
If I understand it right, though, the 50% rule was to assure being able to run the city for 6 months if we have no more income coming in. So
right,
half of 18, almost $19 million, we're right there right now.
Yes, but if you think about it, I mean, some would also question when we were at 73%, why did we have so much money? This is taxpayer money that we have just sitting here. I understand what it's being used for, but the money is just, I mean, this is an emergency situation in certain cases with the COVID-19 thing.
Go ahead,
Joanne,
Jerry.
can you help us out a little bit? This beginning balance of 10.8, is that after the decline or the deficit for this year is taken out of existing reserves? What
Yes.
are we at the moment?
Okay, so I'll just tell you the numbers because I have them written down, okay? So, the fund balance, and this is also in the one report in the budget. But as of June 30, 2019, I say the fund balance is $11,834,639. And then I made all of the adjustments to that. And then I have for the end of this year it to be, so end of June 30, 2021, it's almost $10 million.
So we've taken out $1 million for this year's budget, correct?
I've taken out
$1 million out of the reserves just to get through this year.
Yes, but the fund balance number that I'm using, so what's confusing is I go back to the last CAFR that we had, and I use the numbers from the audited actuals. So I'm using reliable numbers and then make adjustments to those numbers, and that's where I get at the end of June 30, 2021. So at the end of the fiscal year for the budget that we're doing, that's where I'm projecting us to be, almost $10 million.
All right, I want to go back to this a little bit. So because already we've taken $1 million out to get through this year. Next year, we have revenues of 15, expenditures of 18. Tell me where these plus transfers are coming from, because that looks to me like a $3 million deficit.
Well, then let me show you, because those are the next slides. So generally, so the public safety or the Prop P fund is where we have paid for police and fire salaries for the last 3 years. So the current year would be the budget year 2021. This was last year, and this was the year before that. So all of this is from Prop P, and it's for those salaries.
So we're going to take 1.695 million out of the Prop P fund.
Yes. And we transfer it just like we did in the past. Now, some cities have it where the Prop P money is right in the general fund, so you wouldn't see a difference. But we're trying to do that to demonstrate so you can see what we're doing with this money. And that's why I have these all itemized the way I have them, so you can see specifically what's going where. So then we have a street improvement.
Wait, can we hold up on the public safety for a second? So the 725,000 and a half that we are transferring from this year, was it accrued in this year, or has some of that been accumulated from previous years?
I made this confusing when I say current year. This is 2020. This is the upcoming budget year. Okay. I've calculated it. It's actually slightly more than this after I've done the most recent calculations.
But it is, we expect that to take that in during the fiscal year in which you're counting it.
Yeah.
It's not an accumulation from the past, because I'm getting confused because for a few years since we weren't using it all, some of it then got transferred. And so I just want to make sure that we're not building in a place where we have to catch up. But I think you've answered my question.
No, so
Thank
on
you.
a few slides ago, it's not going to be a very hefty fund balance in the public safety fund. It's the 200 some $1,000 with the 20% reduction that I have in place. And again, it's a guesstimate.
Maybe I can help this a little bit on, I hope you all had a chance to look at the chart I asked Katie to send you. But if you look at it now, if you look at total ending fund balance, the bottom row on the numbers, it shows we go from an estimated all fund balance, positive balance of $20,060,504. And then the 2021 budget shows ending fund balance of 14 million. So that there's a $6 million swing there.
Whoa.
Yes, and 5 million of it is the firehouse too.
Right.
But it still lowers the overall fund balance down to 14 million.
No. 5 million of it is the firehouse. It was a bond issue. We have the money. Now it's just being spent.
Well, I don't understand it then, because on page, help me out, Joanne. Let me see it. If I go to page 49, let me get to it just a second. In the budget. On page 39, if you look at the bottom row, in the right-hand corner, it says ending fund balance $53,844. I got all these numbers out of the budget, so.
Yes, it does reduce, but it wouldn't have been that high if we didn't have the $5 million in the prior year that we received from the bond issue.
That's absolutely correct. What I'm pointing out is, if you look back to 2014, our ending balance every year was the lowest it was 18 million, and most of it was in the 19, almost 20 million. So we're going to go from 20 million down to a $14 million ending fund balance.
But where did you get that total fund balance for 2014?
Out of the 2014 budget.
Okay.
All these numbers came out of the 2014 through the 21 budgets.
I think, just to be honest, if we want a bunch of history, give me the opportunity to pull it together. But this is a new budget software. I was out of the office for 4 weeks after I had surgery. So, I apologize, but things just aren't as put together perhaps, and there are a few mistakes here and there.
I'm not trying to be critical.
No. Nobody's being critical. We're just trying to figure this out.
That. I'm just saying. If you want more
Joanne,
detail.
can you put up my chart?
I can't put it. No, I don't.
Well, I think anybody can pull it up on their phone or their email or whatever from this afternoon.
Could we just get through these few slides and then get to the capital, please?
Can I just ask but I was just a little confused as to, and I should say this, like, I understand what Bud's trying to, I just want to make sure that the participants who are listening to this understand a little bit better. Can you explain a little bit more about the fund balance that he's talking about? The $20 million now down to $14 million, and exactly what that means?
Yes, so each year fund balance, of course, changes, because if your revenues exceed expenditures, then of course that balance or that bank account increases, and the opposite happens if you spend more money, where then of course your account balance, your checking account balance, whatever it is, decreases. I mean, I would hope this would be a savings account since it's such a large balance. But in any event, the reason it looks so tremendous, and I wish I had more information to compare with our financial statements. I should have done some comparisons on that so you could see, but the reason it looks so scary is because of what happened. And because in 2020 is when we sold our bonds, so that we received $5 million more in revenue. And I'm going to double check this to make sure that the revenue piece really was put in the statements properly, because if my staff didn't put the revenue in there properly, then of course that's the reason for the problem, because we just don't overspend our money. We just don't. And just, you don't know this, but I do 5-year projections. So I look at where we are right now, and then I look at 4 more years in the future to see where we're going to be. I do that with all of the funds. So I'm not sure. I'll need to check on this one to see if there was an issue.
Thank you, Joanne. That was just for clarification purposes.
That's okay.
While you have this up on the slide, we are assessing the business districts this amount of money. What percentage of their annual revenue will that take, given that so many of them aren't up and running? So
I'm going to let
Mara
answer that question, because she was the one who participated with each of these business districts, and they were the ones who chose these allocations and participation, because this is for the flower pots and all the other stuff that they do to make their districts pretty. Mara.
We can't hear her. Mara?
She's not muted. Oh, there we go. I think she's not muted.
No, she isn't muted. Something's not working. We can come back to that.
She's bringing in a plane.
I don't see her.
Swipe her on the bottom. There's more down there.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm just not looking right. Okay, so we'll just skip that for now. And then the other portion, which is the fund transfers to the general fund from capital improvement fund. I could have alternatively just moved all these to the capital improvement fund and just paid out of there. But quite frankly, it's a lot of work, and it's just easier if I leave it in these particular departments and then transfer that amount of money to cover the capital items that we can use that fund for. And so that's where the $148,448 comes from. And then this is the fund reserves. So it is down to the $14,303,844. And then this includes all of the fund reserves for the end of fiscal year 21. When you look at that page that I had, 38 and 39, I have categories. I have special revenue funds and capital project funds. And down in this PowerPoint, it says what the special revenue funds are. And so it would be the street improvement fund, the public safety sales tax, and then the 3 business districts. And then the capital project fund would be capital improvement, park improvement, grant, stormwater, sewer lateral, and the new fire station.
In 18 years, we've never had any of those funds reserves drop below 0. We've never had them anywhere near 0.
Say that again, Steve. I didn't get it.
None of those funds have ever been without reserves since I've been here.
Okay.
Mara, can you hear us? You're not making any sound. Okay, you're trying to fix it. All right. Yeah, you stop talking. You're wasting your time.
Can I ask another question while we're waiting for Mara?
Maybe unplug the headphones.
Go for it, Laura.
So one of the things that popped up, and the reference to it is on page 132, that we have a 20% increase in property insurance.
Yes.
What explains that?
We were trying to get an answer from Slate, and we were not able to get the answer from them. We've called and left several messages, so I can't tell you that, but that is a voicemail that they have that they need to be returning.
I will get that to you in short order. Yes, I am on the Slate board. I just can't remember. We spend so much time talking about so many different things. I can't I'm drawing a blank on it, or I missed that part of a meeting or something, but I'll have that for you in short order. Saw it kind of late, went looking for it, and just haven't got a response.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I can hear I can only speak into this microphone, but now I can hear you out of here. Did you still need the answer for the business districts?
Yes.
So on the business districts, they kept everything at basically a flat rate to continue with what they needed to do in the district. All of them have a reserve fund. So they were going into the reserve fund for some other projects, but not for the streetscape improvement pots and other things. They kept it pretty much at a flat rate with no new projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve, do you want to talk on this one?
Was I supposed to?
Would you?
Okay. Balanced budget with usage of reserve funds. I think that speaks for itself. You understand we're going into reserves. Again, the perspective on that is that this is a temporary bite and that we'll resume normal activity, and Webster Groves will not cease to exist. There's what we consider moderate raises in the budget. The health insurance went well. It's only a 2% increase from Slate for the upcoming fiscal year. Joanne, I do not remember the loggers employee contribution change. It was in the budget letter, and it was 0.1% for one, and I can't remember if it was.
That's okay. I was I was hoping you weren't so fast because I was looking for it myself, and here it is.
It was next to nothing net.
So it increased 0.5% for general employees, and then decreased by 0.5% for uniformed fire personnel, and 0.1% for uniformed police officers.
0.1%.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The reason this list is a little brief is because we cut a bunch of stuff out of the budget. The salt dome is reasonably full, get you through the year. We continue with shared services for dispatching for the 8 municipality consortium. Well, we wrestled with that budget over and over and over, and I can't remember exactly where it ended up compared to last year, but it's pretty flat what's going on there. So that's the kind of general stuff. Normally we have a little bit more here, but this is the stuff that affects you so much. What happens to your reserves, and are you given raises? And health insurance can always has the potential to take a bite. Highlighting that once again, loggers has turned out to be a pretty good deal. I suspect you would be, if we were still doing 401s, we would be affected much less favorably, and we have long since crossed the threshold with the trajectory of that compared to what the actual trajectory of loggers has been. We thank the taxpayers for that. If you don't salt the streets, you get run out of office and out of town and everything else. So we don't take that lightly. And that's kind of those highlights. Yeah.
Pardon me. The most important part of all of this is the moderate raises. How much are they? Since most of our budget is for personnel, what is that? I mean, to me, that's the biggest issue here to talk about, that and health insurance.
That's my concern too, Jerry. The raises, it's probably around, what, $500,000, something like that. My guesstimate, but my concern, I guess, is, or maybe we can look at this thing and maybe just postpone it, say 6 months down the road. This economy is so uncertain, and people are unemployed, and people are losing their businesses, and things are not looking good for a lot of people that are not working right now. And to put out a 3.5% rate, I think that's what it is altogether, 3.5% raise, I think is not really a good idea.
I want to talk about this because, you know, I meet weekly with other mayors, and many of the cities are like reevaluating in 3 months before they determine what to do with a lot of their expenditures. But I want to understand, when I hear no one giving salary increases, why you have recommended this, Steve and Joanne.
Well, I think it's in the budget letter. We don't carry ourselves like most other cities, and in 08, 09, when certain cities were giving sad speeches about their layoffs and their problems. As you know, we didn't lay anybody off. We left positions vacant for a little while, but we didn't lay anybody off, and we got through that. And we never even went upside down because of, we know how to behave and how to carry ourselves. And that kind of behavior is what's led to the substantial amount of reserves that we have. Once again, a disaster is not a tornado going through a neighborhood. We don't put the Emerald poles back up. We don't build you a new house. This is a disaster, and it's temporary, we believe. So I see it on a timeline where a bite comes out. That we the way some of those cities work is they have that minimum requirement fund balance, and then whatever is above that, every year they take and they find a way to spend it. And that's not what we behave ourselves. That's not how we've behaved ourselves, and that's how we've grown the reserves from 3 or 4 million to what it is now over the last 17 years. And so we don't have to give those speeches. We don't have to lay people off. We have cushions, and we have years where we barely make it through, and then we have years where we accumulate more reserves. So my way of thinking on it is, because of the way we've carried ourselves and live within our means and all that corny stuff I've said, that Jerry's the only one, you know, with the history to know that that's been pretty consistent. I'm not sure why I would recommend punishing our employees for that type of behavior. What goes on up here with this budget that tends to be a little static, as you know, is frequently a fair amount of pain and a whole lot of art and a whole lot of work. And I like to think that the product you see on the street is well thought of. There are things impacting this. There's a clear message from the council that we wanted to treat the firefighters, when they chose to organize in a fair manner. We did. It was acceptable to everybody around. I can't argue that we were overly generous. We were, and they weren't overly greedy. It pretty much followed the trends of what's being paid around here. And they're going to get their raise. That's in the contract. So that was bargained that way, that for the first couple of years of the bargaining agreement, they get the raise whether or no. What's happening, as Joanne said before, with police is that we saw a lot of communities take the Prop P money and give it to the police officers. So what we've actually picked away at the police officers' salaries a little bit the last couple of years, but it's getting restless out there because not only are we trailing our peers when we put a superior product on the street, but now we have a firefighter police officer gap that goes with that as well. And you're going to end up paying that. I mean, that's where it's going to end up one way or another. If you want to buy a year or some period of time, separate the firefighters from the rest of our forces, you can do that. But especially on the police side, if you want to keep up the quality people, maybe we're overly generous. I don't think so. I just think it's a good place to work and we're fair and we have that reputation, but we're a bit of a destination for police officers and firefighters. Now, that will not continue with police officers, I promise you, and there'll be other consequences. So this stuff was heavily scrutinized by Joanne and by Dawn and reviewed thoroughly by me too, and all that's in here to support that is that when we first started getting the Prop P money and you said, why aren't you spending it all? Why aren't you spending it all? And everybody doesn't want us to spend it because we were watching. We watched to see what happened. We kept up. That's exploded a little bit. We're still trying to keep up. It can't, it's not vicious. The fire districts are vicious, and our folks are reasonable. It's just reasonable. Your firefighting force and your police officers come to you nowadays with bachelor's degrees and frequently master's degrees and frequently having put themselves through an academy. And they should be remunerated fairly, and you shouldn't lead this discussion without hearing from Dale, perhaps. But Joanne could show you right now that the lion's share of this is in those two areas. Is it problematic down the line? Yeah, a little bit. That's why you need to hire somebody good. It was problematic when I got here and we got all the way through and we don't go upside down. And my view is this is a temporary crisis, and the demoralization that will go on in certain corners of our organization, certain specific valuable spots, or when we start segregating employees and give raises here and not there. That's how it was when I got here.
So Steve, I want to make sure I'm understanding.
I've spent 17 years trying to rebuild that dignity. So that's where you see my absence of courage. With one last thing, if you choose to do that, if you choose to take it from there, you know, it's a hard time for me to repeat things I've written in budget letters before. Good things always seem to happen in Webster Groves, and I have a great amount of faith in that. We've always caught breaks here and there, and I think that will continue. We have people wanting to build apartments and open restaurants all over the place. At least we did 2 months ago. And I think you should keep supporting that and putting the right product out there. Challenges doesn't mean it can't be done. I have tried to bring dignity and respect to the employees, and I'd like to continue that. So sorry to get emotional about it, but it's just something I would support you sucking up and sucking it up for. I've tried to pry some of those reserves out of the fingers of council over the years, and we have a little bit here and there for the occasional project. I can just think of no better project than continuing as if it's business as usual and counting on it to come back. We're not spending we're not using reserves to make a one-time purchase. I think the trajectory we're on and the revenue will come back. There's a section missing, and we're taking money from here and we're plugging that in there. Like I said, if you want to keep up, if you want the best people, you'll continue to do that one way or another. So it get you this year, get you next year. But think about it carefully, and if you do want less money in this budget, that's why we do this early in advance of the hearing. I would hope that you would send us back to work on that. That's what this is all about. That's what this is always all about. And I have no complaints about the way my budgets have been met by the council. Always very respectful. It's sort of unbelievable. It's very, very gratifying. And if this is the year you go, I can't take that big of a problem. I can't take that much debt. I don't like that big a salary increase. We'll work on it for you if we have to, but I'm not trying to make you the bad guy. I'm just sending you the budget.
Yeah, you are.
Steve, can I ask a question, Steve?
Yeah, and I'm going to go after Bud if we could.
I'll go after Laura if I could.
Okay. Bud first.
Steve, the contractual obligation for firefighters, what's the increase supposed to be?
It's their 2% and the step plan that's in that agreement.
And how much is the step?
I don't remember what the percentage is. I can look at the agreement. It'll take me a bit. But it gets them to their maximum in 8 years.
Yeah, that was the deal. That was part of the thing. Instead of we had them getting to their cap in 10 years, and they wanted, and what we settled on was 8.
So my guess is probably 5 or 6% for those who are less than 8 years.
Plus 2? So it's 7 to 8% for the fire?
Probably.
Maybe, at most.
Maybe 6. I'm trying to remember if the 2 is already part of the 6 or not, Jerry. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Sorry, Bud, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I just thought that I didn't realize it was that high. Whatever it was, possibly we could look at that, but we're looking at 3.5% at least for everybody else. At least that's in the proposal right here. So I still think the contractual obligation we absolutely got to adhere to. That's done deal. But the rest of it, I think we have to take a pause and see where this thing is really going to be. I'm very worried. I'm usually pretty optimistic, but I know a lot about economics, and I don't like what I'm hearing. I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm very worried. And Jerry, you guys don't know this, but when I first started teaching economics at Webster University in 1998, the first textbook I used for a number of years was Jerry's and Pat's. It was the 9th edition, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know who Jerry and Pat were. I thought a couple brothers or something. Not a professor somewhere. So yeah, that's my gut. My gut says, in fact, I was going to get a little bit on my high horse for preaching, whatever you want to call it, looking at this possible hole we can end up in, not just us, this whole darn nation. And I'm scared to death. And I don't get scared easily. I think we need to see what happens. 3 months down the road might be a good time, and see what we can do. We may have to do something even more drastic than we're doing right now to keep our city alive. We don't know yet.
Mayor?
Laura, I think Laura was next. Laura?
Right. So I do not object to us using the reserves. I agree that the reserves are there for this purpose. But I object to making a commitment to our employees that maybe a year from now we can't really uphold. If the projections are not going to end up where they are, and I am usually an optimist, and I feel like as I'm listening to this, about the most conservative person thinking here, and that has never been a position I've ever been in my life. And I don't want to make a commitment to employees that we can't actually fulfill, number one. Number two, I don't agree that this is going to come back as easily. I would never, ever be happier than to be wrong in that. But I agree with Bud. We've got to take a more cautious approach than we have right now until we have more information about what our situation actually is. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Mayor, can I interject briefly?
Yes.
I certainly understand the severity of the economics. I certainly understand the concern of the council members. But I do want to advocate for the adjustment for the police officers, whether or not they get the 3% raise or not. And that is that we are so far behind comparable communities and so far behind the other public safety members here within the city that if it's not adjusted, I'm not making a threat of any kind, I'm just telling you the reality, is it's going to have a really negative effect upon the environment for the police officers. And they're going to feel that they haven't been treated fairly. We've worked really hard here to create an environment and a culture where the employees do feel like they've been fairly treated and that the council is looking out for them. And they've been fairly patient because the city has been waiting, looking where the Prop P money is at. But when you're looking at where you're $11,000 and $12,000 behind comparable communities and an equal amount behind other public safety employees in the city, I can understand how their feelings are. And I'm telling you how they're going to feel. I also understand how again, the circumstances of the economics, but we would be better off looking at trying to cutting something, whether it's cars, vehicles, or other things, as opposed to not adjusting salaries. It's something that's really important. And it's one of the reasons why I know that Steve and Joanne worked hard on the budget to get that in there. I'm not super optimistic, but I do believe that this is be a legitimate time and place to use funds to try and help the police officers who I think really try hard to do a good job, and that they're going to feel that they weren't treated fairly if the adjustment's not made. Again,
Dale, can you explain, you've used the word fairly a couple of times. Explain to me what that means. I just want to make sure I really understand.
Well, fair is kind of a subjective word, as you all know, but they know what the comparisons are with other cities. Right now, we're about number 15, and we compared to other ECDC cities, Kirkwood, and other similar situated departments. We are between $10,000 and $12,000 behind them in our starting pay, and they know that, and they've asked that we try and make an adjustment. This adjustment doesn't catch us up to these people. We're still behind them, and we'll still be behind other public safety employees here within the city, but it would get them within shouting distance. That's what their idea of fair is. They're not trying to be greedy. They're not trying to ask for the moon. They're just kind of asking for, can we get close to what other public safety people are making, including those in the city?
Chief, I was wondering, I know that we've been provided the data during the negotiations with the firefighters as to our comparisons with other municipalities. Have we been provided the comparisons in regards to the police officers?
Yes.
I don't recall.
Don and Joanne both went over that very thoroughly.
Okay. Can we, Joanne?
Do you mean have you been provided?
Yes. Have had as a council?
No. We're happy to do that.
Yes. Can you please send that out? The second question I had was, obviously there's a lot more that goes into employment than just salary. Where are we in comparison to other municipalities when it comes to the loggers, comes to healthcare, comes to all the external benefits for our police officers?
We are similarly situated, but not above.
All right.
I have a question. Go ahead, David.
I cut you, Emerson. I chimed in there, so I'm done for right now. I apologize. You go, Emerson.
Emerson, go ahead.
Steve, just a question. All the funds that we'll have to transfer from the reserve, that is not all for police salaries?
Mm-mm. No, actually, everything from the public safety sales tax fund, Prop P, covers police and fire salaries and benefits. The only thing that you would be taking from the general fund is your non-uniformed employees, which is an increase in total of about $358,000. Your police and fire is about $830,000.
I just want to make sure I knew what exactly is going to be transferred and why.
Right.
Or proposing to be transferred and why.
Do you want me to go back to the?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
So I did want to comment. I think we are trying to be realistic about what is happening as far as a downturn in the economy and how it's affecting Webster Groves. But I do think it is important to think about the morale issue and saying we were going to do raises and now we're not. And so I am wondering, are there other ways to cut expenses? And do we have time for Steve and Joanne to kind of see places where they can make adjustments?
Sure.
I think that's an excellent idea. A question, Joanne, how much does Prop P reserve have in it right now?
Let me go to that. It'll take me just a few minutes because I can't remember where the slide is.
You know, the corollary question that we're discussing with firefighters and police officers is, where are our other non-uniformed employees in comparison to other municipalities? Because we're talking about a 3% increase across the board. And where are they in comparison to everyone else taking what we've already know about the police and fire?
Just to clarify real quick, it's a 2% across the board at the beginning of the year. That's what carries through the whole year. And then we do evaluations of our employees towards the end of the calendar year. And so everybody doesn't get 1.5. Extraordinary employees get 2, lesser employees get 1. That is easier to keep up with. And jump in anytime, Joanne, but the public safety type salary effects are always more dramatic. The step thing that shocks you is a standard practice in this part of the world and many others. And the fire districts, for example, there are fire districts that have a raise that would shock a range that would shock you of a incoming firefighter paramedic with standards as generous as getting to the top of that range in 3 years. So they get double-digit increase every year. The balance of our employees, the clerical staff, code enforcement officers, Parks and Rec people, anybody in Parks and Rec, they're always punished and behind. Those things track, and we check those against what goes on all around us. We have ways of doing that with survey data and so forth, and it's much easier to keep up with those. So a standard type raise like we've been doing for those folks, all the rest, everybody non-public safety is tracked pretty well. Right, Joanne?
Some of them generally do. We are making some, we intend to make a few minor adjustments for 2 employees.
Yes, there's always 1 or 2 that's, I'll just give you an example. When building is going good, the trades are good, there's no former folks that are qualified to be building inspectors and things like that, all got stuff to do. It's harder to find those people, and those jobs tend to inch up during those periods of time. When building falls off, you can find experienced grown-ups that will fill those jobs for you. It's much harder when things are flourishing, and we've been flourishing here quite some time. So that's just an example.
Well, and I appreciate that, Steve. You've answered my question, but I do want to just comment on just one thing that you mentioned in response to my question, was about the fire districts and compared to Webster Groves. If I recall that Chief Yohe's presentation one time was that Webster Groves citizens spend 19 cents per every $100 assessed for their fire district, whereas some of these fire districts are paying $1 for every $100. So we get a great bang for our buck, and there's no doubt about that. But I think that's a demonstration of the fragmentation in St. Louis County than it is a Webster Groves and the disparity of income or the disparity of salaries and why we are so fragmented and why there's such a problem and why there's such a disparity. So while I understand what you're saying, I just want to point that out, that, it's going to be difficult for us, a municipality like Webster Groves, to continually try to stay pace with some of these fire districts in a fragmented system that we are currently doing.
We don't come anywhere near staying, keeping pace with the fire districts. They know that. I've met with the shop steward within the last week. And what we do achieve is, as you know, we just had one come back to us, an experienced, good officer, a good firefighter, paramedic come back to us, and they're content. They're happy. They understand you can't chase that, but there are benefits in us not being an impersonal organization and so on and so forth to being here, and makes it somewhat coveted. Mr. Yohe, would you care to weigh in at all?
I would. I think what we had, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think what we've had in the past, we had that continual turnover because of not being competitive. We don't have to be equal to, but we have to be competitive with the districts. And in the past, we've had that continual turnover at the low end of our department. We were always losing our 1 and 2 year guys. We would get them trained, we would get them experience, and then they would get snatched up by the fire districts. And what we did is we stopped that turnover at the low end, and we're filling that middle gap. We don't have old guys and young guys. Now we're filling the middle gap, and we have people that we can make into qualified officers as their experience dictates and the openings come along. So I think it is very important that, police or fire, that you remain competitive. You don't have to remain equal, but you have to remain competitive with the neighboring departments, or you're going to lose your low end.
Dale, can I ask you a couple of questions? Are our police officers on a step plan?
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
So they don't have a step plan that pushes them up by 6 or 8% a year like the firefighters do, correct?
They do not.
Okay, so they don't, that's a non-comparable. Are there other departments that have steps, or is that something that's common to police or fire?
No, there are other departments that have step plans. And
but we don't.
We're not trying to stay equal with other departments. We're just trying to stay somewhat competitive. We have an environment here. We've worked very hard. Steve and the council have been very generous, treated us well. And again, the culture here is of one where it's employee friendly. And the officers here understand that we're never going to be able to be at the top as far as pay goes from a lot of other municipalities. But they do feel, based upon what's happened in the last 3 years and with what's happened with other public safety here within the city, that we've fallen way, way behind. And we've assured them that we were going to try and address it. Obviously, we can't promise them any kind of salaries, but we felt comfortable that we would be able to make some adjustments. Obviously, this health emergency has thrown a big wrench into it, but I think that they still would feel that if they weren't, if the salaries didn't have some kind of adjustment, that it would be a really negative influence on their environment and damage a lot of the good work we've done and worked hard with over the years. I can't tell you for certain, but the same thing that Chief Yohe was talking about, the younger employees, they may stay here during this crisis when you're talking about looking long-term, but in the next year or two, when the economy starts coming back, they're going to migrate to departments that are paying $10,000 and $12,000 more a year. We can't make up with the environment and the culture here that kind of disparity in salaries.
I wonder if there's not some other way for us to use these Prop P funds. Obviously, with the step process that the fire department has, they get a bigger chunk out of the public safety sales tax. I'm wondering if there's something else that we can design that would help with that particular department, with the police department, that would put them on a more even keel with the fire department. Just a thought. And I don't think, for all of the folks who are on here, that any of us want to do any harm to our employees. We're all very thoughtful of them, appreciative of them, and I think we're just all struggling. What I don't want to see is 6 months from now we start laying people off because we simply can't afford them. And
Well,
so
I think if we find ourselves in a position 6 months from now where things were not progressing as we thought that they would, that the officers here, we're not under a contract. They haven't formed a union, they haven't done an association. They would be more than willing to look at adjustments or do something through attrition. And I've already talked, when I talked to Steve, city manager, and the finance director about those kind of things, that's something that we can do. It's important that we can have enough people here for public safety. But if 6 months or a year out, we needed to, through attrition, do something, we can certainly do that to adjust. So I don't think that they're not willing to accommodate. I just think that they would feel in this situation, if they didn't get an adjustment to get us at least somewhat competitive with the other departments, they'd be very disappointed. I know that would have, I'm just being honest with you, it would have a very negative effect on the morale and the culture here that we've worked very hard over a number of years to get to where we are.
And
Steve, I like,
getting back to Pam's suggestion and Chief Tom's suggestion too. Could we put a group of people together in each department, from each department, and do a crisis management situation, figure out how to get at least $500,000 out of the budget other than what we are currently thinking to give to pay raises? Can we cover that at least through this year? I'm looking at the public safety sales tax fund balance, and it's less than $300,000 right now. So that's not going to go very far in the first place. So what can we do then to be able to do both, and maybe not the whole 3%, but something at least, give them an increase to know that we are concerned and care about them. I'm also thinking too that we're not the only ones in this boat. There's another, 98 municipalities in the same boat. They're not going to have any revenue to give raises either.
Well, our current adjustments are not going to catch up to where they are now. If the other departments that we did a study on and looked at, if they give a 0 raise this year, we'll still be behind them a significant amount.
Yeah.
I like Jerry's idea to start looking at something for the future, for the STEP proposal, and to see those numbers that I guess Joanne and Steve has as far as comparisons to other municipalities. I think just making some type of strategic plan, to say when we can get them up to speed or when we can get them up to what other officers are making, it'll be a step forward. But I think we need to see some data. And going back to Pam's idea, I think it'd be a good idea to send it back to Steve and Joanne to see what else can be cut from the budget to make it more palatable.
And I'm all for giving our essential workers, especially our fire and police, the raises that they deserve. I'm wondering though, if right now what we're doing is planning long-term and not short-term. We have a short-term problem, hopefully only a short-term problem. And I am all for creating this step plan for our police officers in order to ensure that they get to the place that they need to get to. I'm just wondering whether if we were to just figure out, hey, we take 3 months, 4 months and determine where we are, if that's just not more advantageous for the taxpayers of Webster Groves. And also, more importantly, for the safety of Webster Groves.
Well, I'm going to tell you how the police officers will look at that. Again, I understand the dire circumstances, and I think they understand that as well to some degree, but they've kind of been told, again, to wait, to hold off on looking for these kind of things. And what we're telling them now is, well, we're going to look at it again 3 or 4 months from now. I'm not saying you're not going to get it. The guy there, everybody here has integrity. They're going to give a good effort, but it's going to damage the morale and the environment here significantly if we don't find a way to make adjustments in this budget for them.
I am very well aware of, having spent time with them on Saturday, that they all believe they're getting a 3.5% salary increase. I agree with you, Dale. That's what they think.
I mean, have the number of calls dropped during COVID, or, you know, I mean, it seems like they're still going to have the same workload during this time. So
the calls initially did decrease by about a third, but they're ticking back up.
yeah, so I mean, that's
Just a little technical point. The reserves get eaten up not by absence of revenue, but by revenue and expenditures not matching each other. So if, as the fiscal year goes by, mid-fiscal year is January 1st, right? If we've done this before, we've done it time and again, actually, as the year goes by, the budget is the plan. You can revisit the budget. You can leave positions open. You can lay people off. If we're all back quarantined because the winter brings a horrible outbreak, everybody around us will be doing whatever they have to survive. You can lay people off. You can leave positions unfilled. This wouldn't cause that, but don't underestimate a little bit our ability to react to it down the line if we have to. That's what your operational people are. They'll figure these things out in a time of need, and so.
Let me just ask one more time here. If I hope you all have your chart, because what Steve just said hit a bone here. If you look at the chart that I sent to you, it has 3 sets of lines on it. The top lines are all revenue funds and all revenue expenditures. Okay, so if you just look at that set of lines, there's only 2 years, I think, on there where we didn't spend more than we got in. So in other words, our revenues are not keeping up with our expenditures over time. And I don't know if anything's going to change that in the future. The revenues seem to be pretty consistent for the most part, except for this year and next year because of the COVID thing. So if we can't do better than spend less than we're getting in, the revenue funds aren't going to grow.
I mean, to be fair, Bud, right? Like the past couple of years have been extremely bullish. And I don't know if we necessarily should expect that for the remainder of perpetuity.
Just so you know, though, we made those assumptions that we were in all funds going to spend more than we brought in because some situations existed. For example, all the way back when we issued the other debt in 2011, we spent more those years because we had the street improvement. We had the money the prior year, but then we had the money that we needed to spend down on those projects. And then we've had other things. In our 2021 budget, we have a stormwater project that's $500,000. Well, we don't bring in very much money, but then in future years, there's like a $90,000 project and different things like that. The case is the same with many things. Some years we have to pay for a ladder truck. That I think is $950,000 or something like that. Other years we have much smaller expenditures in different departments. But it's all a matter, again, of managing it and determining which is what we're going to spend when. So yes, many times the expenditures exceed the revenues, but not in the same fund.
Well, yeah, but in funds overall, if you just look at the totality of running the city, all funds, okay?
But I have never in my 13 years here run the city short.
No,
I don't want you to either. So can you project out, based on normal times, can you project out what you would expect revenues to grow in each of these funds, a positive balance, in other words, each year in all revenue funds, or at least most of them, how that would grow over the next 8 years.
As I mentioned earlier, expenditures increase at a faster rate than revenues. So there's always that on my expenditure and revenue graphs that I have in my own system. I show that we have an uh-oh frequently in the general fund because revenues, especially because we're a residential community, our revenues, especially the sales tax and others, grow at a slower rate than even other cities. For example, like cities of Creve Coeur and other things like that, their revenues grow faster.
Their revenues grow faster than ours?
Yes.
Over expenditures. So they're bringing in more money than they're spending.
Yes, because they are less residential than we are.
But we can't go on forever spending more than we bring in.
This is a unique year, I think, too, right?
Well, I'm just looking at the last 8 years. Well, the last 6 plus 2 years.
Actually, I don't have anything more to add. So can we finish this so that we can go to the capital piece, please?
Perfect.
So I'm just gonna, these were the slides we already went before. So this is the boards and commissions items that we present to you. And as you'll recall, we had some requests initially from the Arts Commission, but Jerry was really kind and said that we could cut items out of there. And so we did. And then I left the Business Development Commission items in from what was suggested. There was one item, but I don't know where we're going to go on it now. It's the video where we do the individual businesses and talk with them about their various interests. And of course, we put it on social media, but it was about growing their business, why they decided to open a business in Webster Groves, et cetera. And that was something that Mara and I were going to work on with the businesses and with the company, the third-party company that we work with on our social media called Creative Entourage. And then the last item on this is the Sustainability Commission. And then finally, this is the Capital Improvement Program. So in total, for all the funds that participate or are part of the capital projects funds, we have budgeted for fiscal year 2021, $2,816,790. And I've just listed the funds, the items that it entails. And then on the same slide, I have, and not a very good order I see, but I have some of the items that I thought I'd like help with the department directors to talk about. So the first one is the annual chip seal program. And so I'm just going to have Todd just give a quick highlight on both the chip seal. Todd, would you mind doing both the chip seal and the mill and overlay at the same time?
Sure.
And they're on pages 311 and then 309.
So the chip seal is a program that we do. We do the mill and overlay every 21 years. And then after the mill and overlay is done, then we go back after 7 years and do a chip seal over that mill and overlay so that it can reseal the pavement and give longer life out of that pavement. And we do that twice every 7 years. And then when we get to that 21 year again, then we mill it off and overlay it. So that's pretty much what the programs are. And it's just a rotating, and we go around the city, different sections. We have some maps that I didn't include in the budget, but if anybody needs a copy of it, I can send it out to Katie and she can get it out to everybody. It shows what streets we're going to be doing in what years. And that's how we keep track of where we're at.
Would you also talk to us for a minute about the parking garage ceiling? Because I know that one is one where it seems like it's very expensive and it looks like it's every 3 years. And I'm trying to remember why it's happened so frequently. It's such a high expense?
The parking garage had a failure, and we had the original design engineer looked at it and said, yeah, there was a design flaw. So it wasn't designed properly. And so there was a failure in one of the beams. And so we had to cut a section out and put new concrete in. And we did that a couple years ago. And it was on recommendation that we should reseal the top deck with a urethane coating every 3 years after that repair was made. So that third year will be next year for our first urethane coating. And then they recommend that we do it every 3 years because it wears off from the traffic and weathering and that. Because it's the top surface of the deck that needs to have it. So not the entire garage, just the top surface.
Okay.
That's a couple $100,000 for that.
It just seems so much. And then I guess every 3 years we have to, so after 2024, we'll have to do it again in 3 more years?
Correct. So they're recommending every 3 years because of the weathering and the traffic wearing it off.
Okay.
It's a sealing. A sealant is what it is. It seals the deck.
Okay. I'm going to then skip from the next 3 items, and I'm going to go to police vehicles and tasers. Dale, would you talk about those 2 for us, please? Pages 278 and 279.
Sure. It's police vehicles is a fairly simple explanation. We generally, we have a fleet of 23 vehicles. We generally try and transition 3 new marked vehicles each year. Some years we need to get an unmarked vehicle for administrative or detectives. This is one of those years. We actually had a car that was totaled because of an accident this year. So really, we probably needed to do 4 and 1, but to help out with the budget, we're not going to trade one of the cars, and we're going to keep one of the older cars. All the cars, the marked vehicles either have at or over 100,000 miles. The detective car that we're replacing has 120,000 miles on it. The tasers, they're an important tool for all the officers. It's a less than lethal force weapon. It's between the taser, between the pepper spray or the baton and their duty pistol. They're not deployed or used very often, but when they are, it's an important tool for them to have. The cost is well worth it. It protects both the officer and the suspect. You would either, when the case would, they would either have to use, either go hands-on in a physical confrontation with possible injury to either the officer or the suspect, or actually have to use deadly force. So it's an important tool, added tool for them to have. Something that the tasers are going to be 5 to 6 years old. They're getting older. They need repair. There's updates where you can actually track the use when they're deployed with the times and dates and who uses them. So again, it's something that we don't use very often, but it is an important tool for the officers on the street to protect both them and the suspects.
Do you have a certain number that you're replacing each year? I can't remember.
This year's we're replacing all of them.
All of them. Okay.
Yeah, this is one of those things that we, unless one of them needs, gets broken, in which case they're under warranty. It's not something that we replace incrementally. We're replacing all of them this year.
I got confused or got yours messed up with something else where you're, it's the portable radios where you're replacing them.
Right.
Like so many at a time.
Putting that off for another year since we were able to get a contract with the county for maintenance on them.
Okay. All right, the next 2, Tom, would you talk to us about the firefighter structural gear and the extrication rescue system? Those are on page 286 and 287.
Sure. The firefighter structural gear by the National Fire Protection Association standard has a life of 10 years. After 10 years from the date of manufacture, it needs to be replaced. 2 years ago, we made a commitment that we would like to have all of our firefighters with 2 sets of gear. The second one will be used if the first one becomes contaminated with bloods or hazardous materials or any of the other number of things we get in, or it gets soaking wet at a fire. Then they could switch into another set of gear. We've been replacing 25% of our gear annually, and that way at the end of 4 years, we'll have everybody in 2 sets of gear that's less than 8 years old. And it's important that they have that. Like I said, if we send gear out for repairs, they're rooting through the rag bag, so to speak, to find gear that might fit. And they have to use that less than ideal gear during those times. The extrication equipment, commonly referred to as the jaws of life, and our 2 sets of gear that we currently have in service, one was bought in 1999 and the other was bought in 2009. They are not identical pieces of equipment. They are not interchangeable, and the operation of them is different. As technology has changed with vehicle design and the metallurgy involved, so has the technology and the rescue equipment. And there are times that our extrication equipment will struggle to be able to open or get into a new car that's reinforced with some of the new higher tech metals. So we're looking at replacing both sets of gear that are primary and then putting the newest set of the old gear, the 2009 set, on our reserve pumper.
Sounds good. I have a quick question. So past practice before on the firefighter structural gear was that they just used whatever was there? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it kind of was. The new guy comes in, he goes through the bin, he gets somebody else's pants and somebody else's coat that has been replaced already. So, we're trying to get these guys in good, safe, quality gear.
All right, thank you. Scott, could you now talk to us about the recreation facility HVAC and the park trail replacements? So
Sure,
the
sure.
HVAC is on page 323 and the park trail replacements page 338.
So the rec center has 6 large rooftop units that provide heating and cooling for the building. There's 2 that service the fitness center, 2 that service the gymnasium, 1 really big one that services the meeting rooms, kitchen, bathroom, and the rink offices, and then a kind of smallish system that services the recreation, front desk area, lobby, and the offices. So all those units were either replaced or original to the renovation that happened about 14 years ago. So those units, average lifespan on those is about 15 years. We're approaching that. We're at 14 years right now. One of the units in fitness and one of the units in the gymnasium are currently running on 1 out of 2 compressors. And we've chosen not to replace that other compressor that's in there because we knew that we had it in the CIP. It was coming due to be replaced. Those compressors would be $20,000 each to replace with a crane and all that stuff. So these new systems will be more efficient, so we'll save money. They'll also come with new control systems, which will allow us better able to, oftentimes we got a senior card group in the meeting rooms till 1 o'clock, and then we got a fitness class at 2 o'clock. So to change that heating cooling load between those 2 very diverse systems or groups of patrons is tough with our current older systems. So it's about $255,000 for the HVAC units. And then on page 338 is the park trail replacements. Next year we are scheduled to replace the pathways in Blackburn Park. There's 4,200 linear feet of pathway in Blackburn. It's currently asphalt pathway. It was original to when that park was renovated around 2000 or built out around 2000. So those are going to be some odd years old. They're cracking along the edges and definitely need repair. We hope to do that in concrete so that there's less maintenance in future years and they'll last a little bit longer. But with the cost of oil right now, asphalt is probably going to be way cheaper. So there's a chance that we may go with asphalt and see a cost savings there versus concrete. If they're close to being the same, if oil was high, we would likely go with concrete, but there's an opportunity for huge savings with asphalt. We'll take a look at that.
Scott,
$144,000 for Blackbird.
Scott, can I ask a more general question? I know this doesn't necessarily mean capital improvements, but I asked this question last time of the city manager, and he provided a more general answer. I was hoping maybe you could provide a more specific answer as to if and when we are able to reopen, what exactly the Parks Department is planning on doing with regards to classes and everything like that in regards to social distancing, and are you budgeting in there the need for potentially more spray, wipes, glass, markers and everything like that to prevent or to allow for the CDC guidelines and stuff like that. And if there's anything that we could use from the capital improvement to assist you in ensuring that the recreation facilities go forward this coming year.
So I'll be presenting at council meeting next Tuesday on all of our reopening plans. So I'll hit a lot of that in a lot more detail. But we are stocking up on our gym wipes and things of that nature. We've installed sneeze guards at the front desk and that kind of stuff so that we will be compliant with whatever county protocols are in place and CDC guidelines and such like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I didn't mention earlier was that we rolled back a number of capital items out of fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22 and future years with the help of the department directors. So I just worked with each of them and they told me which ones they could move, and a lot of it was Public Works and Todd, so thank you for that. And of course, as I mentioned before, in the general fund, of course, all the department directors helped me, and we were able to adjust the budget and cut all of the out-of-state travel, out-of-state conferences, and most of the education and all those items. So the last item, the last sheet I have is some bigger picture projects or projects I wanted to talk about that are future years. And one is actually in place right now. We have in the CIP, and I meant to change it to fiscal year 20 and 22, but I didn't change it. So it still says 21 for the City Hall improvement. But I wanted Todd to talk about that and give us just a little bit of highlights and information on the elevator improvements, both at City Hall and then also the one at the rec center.
So the City Hall one, they have ordered the replacement jack, and originally they thought it was going to be here early to mid-May, but that has been pushed back to late May, early June. So I thought we'd have it up and running by the end of May, but now it'll probably be mid to late June before we can actually have an operational elevator. And then we are starting to work on the modernization part of it. We had an electrician come in and they looked at all the things that need to be upgraded. He hasn't given me his price yet, but it should be under price. It's going to be under $5,000 for what he needs to do. A lot of it has to do with the generator. And then the other elevator at the rec center, the City Hall one was 93. The rec center was built in 94. So that one is due for modernization. Hopefully the jack doesn't go out on that one. But so we're just looking at modernizing it next year or in 22. And so that'll just be replacing the control valves, the push buttons,
Bumpers.
The elevator controller, the signalization fixtures, and the door operators. So we can get another 25 to 30 years of life out of it. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Scott, will you talk to us about the new park?
Sure. So on page 343 is a new park. GRG actually closed and purchased the property, the old McDonald's property down at the Deer Creek Shopping Center. So they own all those parcels now that used to be the McDonald's. Prior to that happened back in January. So we had been in discussions with them about helping to renovate that area and make it look better. The goal was to kind of do it like we did the Marshall Avenue Trailhead, where the city would fund some renovations, GRG would fund a large portion of the renovations, and they will also be looking for some donors to help fund that renovation. Originally, we were going to bring that forward for this year. With the financial difficulties that we're having, and GRG's facing the same thing with them primarily being sales tax funded, we've looked to push this out for another year, since we are asking that the city help fund this out of reserve balance, and we realized that we didn't want to take any more out of that reserve balance for the current year. So what we were looking to do, like I said, is GRG owns it now. We'll jointly come up with a plan on what that park will look like and design it. GRG would then build it out, and then once it's built out, they would deed that park back to the city, along with any of the remaining city funds that we didn't use during that construction process. Much like Marshall Avenue, we originally donated $200,000. They gave us about $55,000 back because we didn't use it all for that project. So the idea for that property in our initial discussions was something eye-catching. It's a very visual property as you enter Webster Groves. So it would be something that traffic could see and would be visually impactful, but wouldn't really be a destination place to go to. It would be a waypoint to stop on as people are traveling down the trail. So a couple of the pictures that are there on page 343 are just ideas, just things we threw out there in our original discussions. You know, that first piece is a Tom Otterness bronze playground. It's very sculptural. It looks like a clown or whatever, but it's an actual slide and a playground that kids can play on. The lighted swings below that are something that is in Boston on one of their common grounds, but it's a neat effect as people sit in there, and as you swing, the swings light up. So that'd be something cool for people to be able to see as they're traveling up and down Big Bend.
Is this going to be just within the next year? So if it's in 22, is it going to be finished all in fiscal year 22, or is it going to be longer than that?
So this project is separate from the greenway that's happening, that's going through Maplewood, and will connect our greenway all the way down to the River to Pears Greenway. This is a separate project. I would imagine construction on it would only take 3 or 4 months worth of construction at most, and add another 4 months or so of planning. So it would all be done within 1 year of start to finish on the project.
Okay.
Scott, at one point there was some disagreement between the city of Maplewood and GRG about the Greenway. Has that been resolved?
It has not been resolved. The current Maplewood Council looks at that as a much better project. GRG had to push it down the road, and they reallocated the funds to build it. I believe they were supposed to build it this fiscal year, and because they couldn't get an agreement with City of Maplewood, they chose a different project to bring forward, and they pushed those funds back for a couple of years. But currently Maplewood is theoretically on board for it. There hasn't been agreement signed yet, but they are working forward through that project design to finish out that design phase.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions on that? Then the next one is building security. This is in fiscal year 24, and it's on page 284 of the proposed budget. And I'm going to have Dale speak about that for a minute, please.
Briefly, the current system we have is built primarily for the police department. It covers the outside parking lot, the police parking lot, our lobby, booking area, prisoner processing area. Over the last few years, it's been upgraded to include the very front of City Hall and the customer service desk. Systems will be 10 years old. We've upgraded it a couple times since the original installation. It's costly to upgrade it. The equipment's becoming old. We would like to get a new system that will actually cover all the building. I think it's important for not just the police department, but for City Hall to be have the video security as well. So the new system will cover all the corners will cover the south and the west side of the building, which now has no coverage at all, along with the parking lot, both the police parking lot, the fire department, public works parking lot, and then the city hall parking lots. The system will be HD, be pretty much, a lot of the system will be wireless, so that we won't have to do a lot of wiring on it. It'll be a good upgrade for the security for the city hall, police department, and the fire department.
That sounds good. It's my fault if you were looking, I was looking and I pointed out the wrong page. I should have pointed out page 282, not page 284. The next one is the Aquatic Center renovation, and that's on page 314 for fiscal year 24. And I'd like Scott to talk about that for a bit.
So the original pool was opened in 1994. We were the first recreational pool in the St. Louis region. Prior to our pool opening, they were all just big square bodies of water. So we were really the first one that had multiple pool designs with different slides and different places for different ages. Typical lifespan on a municipal pool is probably 25 to 30 years. We opened in 94, so we're at the beginning of that process now. By the time we would rebuild this, we'd be right at that 30-year mark. So the plan is kind of 3 phases. Fiscal year 22, we would do a master planning that would primarily be funded through a municipal park grant for that master plan process. We'll invite all of our members and residents and special user groups, staff, and public officials to help determine what the scope and size and amenities of a new pool would look like. Then in fiscal year 23, we would take that master plan and start doing construction drawings to really make that plan hardcore and figure out how much it's going to cost us, so that in April of 24, we could go out for no tax increase bonds. The street bonds, the geo bonds for the street funds will be falling off the books at that point. So we'd be able to go out to the residents and ask for a no tax increase bond of approximately $5 million for that project. We would also use a municipal park grant of almost $500,000 on that project as well. So the goal would be to have it ready to go, get approval from the residents and that bond issue, and then finish out the summer of 24 with the current pool. As soon as the pool closes, blow it up, start renovation, and be ready to go by opening summer of 25. All in on that construction, depends on what amenities you want. Could be anywhere from $4 to $6 million is probably a good mark, depending on how you want that pool to lay out. So we're budgeting, $5.5 million, $6 million right in there. We could do less with a smaller project, less amenities type of thing. If we do this plan, we have multiple other pages in the CIP that are future renovations of the aquatic center to the tune of over $350,000. We've got an otter slide in there. We've got new pumps. We've got shade structures. We've got pool plasters and things like that. So those projects, if this plan of renovating the whole pool continues to move forward as we hope, all those other projects will not be realized. We won't do those because it would be silly to, spend $150,000 to renew the pumps if you're going to just blow them up a year later. We can get by for 1 more year.
It was like several $100,000 that we wouldn't spend if we renovated, right?
About $355,000.
Okay.
And some of the other things that we've done over the last couple of years, we replaced the slide. That was $100-something-thousand project. We'll still keep that slide because it'll only be 5 years old. So we would incorporate those things that we're doing over the last couple of years. We will keep and have that in the new pool. It'll basically be blowing up the actual pool structure, new piping, new pumps, and that nature.
Excellent.
God, is it our intention to get participation from Rock Hill with this project?
That would be something that we would certainly ask, yes.
Okay. I mean, as we start planning, since we know we're going towards 24, was that a question we need to start asking now?
It could be, depending on how if they would choose to fund it, how they would. They could go out for municipal park grants to help fund it, like we are going to do, or they could do some sort of bonding issue, or however they would like to start funding it. But it would be something that we would need to sit down with them over the next couple of years to start getting them buy-in and getting them on board if they chose to do so.
Thank you.
I think it's also important that we see if our city council is interested in this or not, because we need to start having conversations with our council, all of you, to find out what kind of interest you have or not in this process. But I think this is really a situation where, in my opinion, we don't really have a choice. We really need to do renovations because this is a very old facility. And if we want to continue to have a nice offering for our residents and potentially non-residents, then we need to put forth some effort in improving it. So then my last one is the additional ambulance. That one is on page 293 and it's in fiscal year 25. And I would like Tom to talk about that.
So back in 2018, when we were beginning the Prop F project, we foreshadowed pretty heavily the need for an additional ambulance, and the new firehouse was designed around that project. You know, call volume is ever increasing. Last year, 2019, 16.7% of our EMS calls were handled by a mutual aid ambulance. You know, I think that's pretty telling. We see an annual increase in call volume. The other factor is that as we develop with our scope of practice in EMS, calls take longer. They spend more time at the hospital. The report writing is longer, more detailed. So we cannot turn around calls like we used to. Man, my best day ever on the ambulance, we wrote reports out by hand. We ran 17 calls in one day. It's impossible for them to run that number of calls anymore. So, you know, eventually we are going to have to add another ambulance and the personnel to staff it. And I think it's time we put it in the budget and move forward.
I did have a question about this because on the chart, the 274, 275, the impact on operations cost says negligible, but wouldn't we have to have additional staff, as you just said, to man that ambulance?
That's an error. It should be. It should not say negligible. I apologize and thank you for pointing that out.
Laura, to answer your question, yes, we would need additional staffing. And there are various things we can look at that, funding mechanisms, alternative schedules, things like that. Currently, there are some federal grants for staffing called SAFER Act grants. And typically they are written with a 3-year descending federal support to them. So the first year they might pay 60% of a salary. The following year they'll pay 40. The third year they'll pay 20. And then it becomes the city's responsibility on that. So there are some mechanisms to help with funding.
Great. So does anybody have any other questions on that? I don't have any more to present.
Well, I think this council probably needs to make some direction and something that you might direct to staff, because if you want any changes, we need to talk about them now. I mean, we brought up a lot of concerns. What further exploration do you want from staff?
I think, sorry, I was cutting someone off there.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you. So I was just going to say, the only thing that my biggest concern would be the sales tax revenue projections. I think that despite what we hope and what we wish, it just seems a little too optimistic in my mind.
Okay. So we're hearing that from David. Laura?
I think what that means is, before we say, I think anything specific about salaries or when, that maybe we give Steve and Joanne a chance to find some more money for those, so that we are not, so that some of us who are, I share David's concern, some of us who are worried about those revenue projections, if we can find other places to fund the salary increases, let's give that a shot first. And then also maybe consider if we have to wait a few months. But that would be the backup plan in my mind.
Yeah. My comments are going to be similar to Laura's. Let's see if we can find that revenue somewhere else. Give Joanne and Steve the opportunity to go back and look.
We're not going to find revenue.
You're not gonna find revenue
cuts.
anywhere.
Well, cuts.
My concern is that.
You don't have money for that, Steve?
Go ahead, Bud.
My concern is projection of revenues. Taking that thing out the best we can to try to understand the, 5-6 year impact of what I'm seeing as a pattern right here, that we're just spending more than we're taking in. And that can't go on forever. That's one thing. The other thing, and Steve and Joanne know this, because and the mayor knows this, when I first came on board and going through the budget, I think it was the 2017 meeting just like this, I asked about, I complimented the narrative for revenue and how that's a 10-year trend in there with explanations as to changes that occur, and which creates a history of some kind too for us. But I said, where is the one for expenditure narrative that would show similar trends over a 10-year period, charted so we could see it, similar to maybe this graph that I sent to you guys. And we could flesh out some of these things that we talked about tonight in that narrative ahead of time. Steve does a good job of putting some of that, at least in his preamble, I'll call it, and talks about those things. But when you read that and then you look at the data, just the raw data of numbers, it just makes you dizzy. That picture is worth 1,000 words, as it's probably worth 10 million words, really. So I would like to see the city adopt some way to put a narrative section in there for expenditures.
Anybody else?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Well, go ahead. Maybe something you say will give me some more insight.
For me, I am concerned about the issue with the police department, because having spent a little bit of time with police and fire over the weekend with Mayors for Meals, they work together, and what they see is the fire department with steady increases, not only through the steps, but also through an annual increase. And they don't have that. And so I think you're talking about another public safety group that puts itself at risk. And my concern is what we do to help that group. But I'm also concerned with this. I think our revenue projections are really rosy, and that probably this is not going to happen. If we get another wave, what sort of mess are we in? I'm hoping we can establish something that we do a review every 3 months of our situation and make some adjustments if necessary. That's what I have to say.
I think that's a great idea.
To that, the police issue, and I agree with you. It's not a good situation.
It's not a good situation.
But the Prop P funds are specifically for public safety, which is police. And what is the projected revenue that we're going to get for that? And if we can substantiate pay raises out of the Prop P funds that we're going to forecast for the next few years, I agree. It's Prop P. We can only spend it on them. Can't spend it on anybody else. Can't move the money to another account.
Yeah, if we can find a way to use Prop P for the police, it would be good.
I did. So that was what I budgeted when I did the transfer. It was for both police and fire pay increases for 2021. That was what that transfer from Prop P was from. Sorry, I interrupted.
That's what it is.
The other thing that I think that hasn't been discussed that Councilwoman Arnold brought up to me today on the phone was the idea that we haven't discussed fully as a council what we can do to assist homeowners and our small businesses. We're discussing how we can help our essential workers and our workforce throughout Webster Groves, but we haven't discussed if there's any means or mechanisms that the city of Webster Groves as a municipality can do to assist our homeowners and residents and small businesses that are struggling right now during this and in the future if a second or third wave hits us.
We've been working with the county on the $15,000 grant that soon will be available for small businesses. And as a city, we've reached out to every business that we have. We've tried to loop them into that program. So that's one thing that we've tried to do.
Can we maybe put that on a work session?
Sure.
Yeah, we
talking about the small businesses.
Our last meeting in person, I raised this issue and we talked about a future work session discussion of it, I thought, but that hasn't come to pass.
Well, we will add it on.
That 15,000 is going to run out pretty quickly because
that's nothing.
That's going to go to all of the county council of District 5, right? So I'd like for us to think, I mean, I talked to Rebecca now and they're trying to raise money for their fund through the Chamber of Commerce. I've talked to a couple of business owners who maybe would like some assistance as things get up and running in publicity and events and things like that. So I just think it's important that we also keep that in mind. Is it going to turn out to be a lot of money? Probably not. But it certainly is something that we should be talking about. And David, thank you for raising that.
Good. Let's put that on the next work session, a discussion of what we might be able to do. Anything else? Pam, you?
No, I've spoken my piece. You know, I agree with different people on different things. So, but I think I've been clear.
So I don't know, Steve, do you have any direction from us? I think
my understanding of it is that we want to try to do our best to be supportive of the police department and contemplate some sort of program for local businesses. And at the same time, I'm supposed to go find 900 grand in the budget and revise the sales tax revenue to more reality. Those things don't go in the same pile. So let me ask.
Right.
We wanted to send you off pretty easy tasks. That's why we.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Is it a matter of degree? Will you? We typically, of course, bring you a budget that's genuinely balanced without going into reserves. If we just improve our situation and try to defend that and tell you how we did it and show you some comparative data that you've asked for tonight and stuff like that, is that not a waste of our time? Should I not come back if I can't find $1 million? I mean, that goes into salaries. There's no other place for that to go. We have to pay our utility bills. We have to buy fuel so we can go to the calls, all that kind of stuff. Or layoffs, you know, and
no.
What? You can't find $1 million without talking about personnel services. So my question is more of a, if we just could dent this, have your quarterly meetings or more often. I mean, actually, we check all this stuff every month as far as how we're tracking. But you could do it with frequency and the ability to adjust during the course of the fiscal year. Will you still accept a budget that's dips a little into reserves, just a matter of degree, not so much?
Probably. I mean, right off the top of my head, you could do a smaller salary increase with a reevaluation mid-year. That would help. Rather than planning an entire year's worth of a salary increase, we just do a mid-year check on that.
What's that mean, a check?
Well, you meet and you see where your revenues are, whether whether we're up, whether we're down, whether we can afford that extra 1.5% that's slotted in January. I mean, that would be one thing that we could do, is look at that increase for January, not plug it in, but say it's something that we will consider when we see what our budget looks like.
Okay.
So Steve, I speaking for myself, I would be more comfortable with something that the mayor is something that the mayor is discussing. No, does it have to be no going to reserves? Absolutely. I am comfortable with us taking some out of reserves. Just how much we're taking and the projections make me really nervous. So the degree to which you can dial back the degree, that would be really helpful. And I understand that I am asking you to do nearly the impossible.
But that's my question, though. I mean, well, this budget is always impossible, and but we make it work. And regardless of the churches, so we don't spend more than we bring in. There's bond issuance. This comes in this year, it goes out in another year. That you can't look at these bulky, all-inclusive numbers. But we've kind of done that to death. So I don't want to go back to that. But yeah, that's what I'm getting. We go back and we just go back to work. That's why we have this workshop well in advance of the hearing or anything. And but like, if you seriously thought there's $1 million with no negative impacts to employees, or that the Business Development Commission will still be funded and stuff like that, there's no magic wand for that in this town. So if we have the latitude to try to be creative, think about things like Jerry just said, and that you'll tolerate, a dent in the reserves without it being an annihilation, or however you view this. That's useful information. That's what I'm after.
I'm okay with you going into the reserves some.
Yeah, I am too with some.
I completely am. I think, Steve, that what you and everyone that came before me has been able to accomplish in making the reserve is for this specific purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the uncertainty is the thing that you're hearing from everybody. And to plot out an entire year in such a degree of uncertainty is the thing that is, I think, scaring a lot of us. So if we can do something smaller, some dip into reserves with a reevaluation, it feels more comfortable.
Absolutely. And that's, it's been pretty steady here, and so you can figure it out. This is, admittedly, we're making stuff up.
Yeah.
As I told you, though, we haven't accounted for any support we get from the federal government or that kind of money. I truly believe, whether you do or not, that we're issuing more permits now than we issued last year. I think that the town is still so desirable and will continue to flourish. And I don't think we've overprojected. And you seem to be most worried about sales tax. I get that, us too. But we'll look at all those things again because of what you said. But I don't expect dramatic adjustments in any of that stuff. It's all a bunch of art. We put it together. Some good needs to happen. The legislature needs to help us. We need to find a better way to get into Jeff City. I mean, I said here, and at one point, and within a half an hour, it wasn't the same one, the UPS truck went by my house 3 times, just my street. It's always on my street. I mean, there's just, you get on Amazon and sometimes you pay sales tax and sometimes you don't, and nobody knows where that goes. Does it go to our zip code? Maybe it's over in Shrewsbury. I'm not sure. But this stuff does not work well, and it continues to be ignored. And I believe we're a minority as far as that goes, states-wise. So,
absolutely.
you know, and some of the expenditures have gone up. We've continued to support because of things like Prop P, because of our generous citizens giving us another a bump in local sales tax, because they approved the fire sales tax, which brings us about $500,000 a year. That's how we've worked this magic. It's got to go on, and we got to find a way to do that. 76%, your employees are your greatest resource. Just bang that drum one last time, and just.
Steve, could you get your folks together and come up with maybe 2 or 3 different scenarios?
But I'm not getting. The charter says I submit the budget. I'm going to submit the budget. I'll use whatever resources I need to try to put this together.
Steve, I was just gonna add, I completely agree. I think that federal money is inevitably to come, but I'm just concerned just based off of how inept our federal government seems to be right now.
I know.
You know, and it just like, even on, I mean, the Democrats in the House are now calling for delay in the $150 billion coronavirus bill on Friday, just because doesn't go far enough to the left and everything. And I just also wonder, a bigger concern is, even if money does come to the state, where and how does it get distributed, whether it's from this Jeff City or from St. Louis County, especially based off of what's going on in St. Louis County right now. So it seems difficult for me right now to bank on that. That's all.
That's why it's not in here as a revenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want it to be a joyous gift down the road. You know?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do that to you. I just ask you to keep the faith a little bit. We've always made this work, and we'll just set about doing what you suggest.
And I want to add something that I think Bud will agree with. We are just printing money now, and the long-term consequences of that are, whoa.
We'll pay for it. Don't
We're
worry.
just printing it. We're not going through the normal processes of borrowing and raising this through Treasury and that sort of thing. We're just printing it.
Put that in perspective a little bit. At the turn of the century, for our first 200 plus years, our national debt was just a little over $5 trillion. So now, 20 years later, it's going to be a little over $25 trillion.
It's been unbelievable.
200 years, 5 trillion. 20 years, another 20 trillion. Figure that out.
We'll all retire one day, right?
Exponentially.
I got mine.
What the heck with the grandkids?
Okay, what else do we need tonight? Joanne and Steve, do you need anything else from us?
Oh, that's plenty. Go ahead.
Plenty. And if you have something else, Laura, that you wanted to include on that, on our work session next week, please let us know. Okay, great. Anybody else? Well, can we call this quits to this tonight? Yes,
I just want to thank Joanne again for her hard work on this. I know it drives her crazy sometimes.
Yeah, great job, Joanne.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's tough. It's really tough. So, all right, you guys, stay safe. Bye, Jennifer. All
right, I'm closing out the meeting.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you Thursday.